potato. Hello. How is everybody doing? Are we excited to talk about books? The answer is yes. The answer is mandatory. If you're not excited about to talk about books, I'll make up for it. I'll skew the average excitement. Okay. Hello everybody. Hello Turquoise. First to arrive, very speedy. Hi Bem. Hi Bun. Hi Johnny. Hi Dust. How are you all doing? Have you had a good day? Have you had a good week? Have you enjoyed book? I see the Bun is trying to fight people. And potatoes are happening. I do enjoy potatoes. I recently learned that an edible book festival actually exists. Is this like is it cake festival but book edition, or is it a kind of thing of some traditional way of making paper that's edible, or most of them seem to be cake, but apparently there are some full meal ones. Oh. I would imagine that would make them a bit difficult to read, which would decrease the functionality as books in my eyes, but you know. People be making books that are less and less like books by the page. One day I will read that one book, the names I've forgotten. But yes. Blue person is absent. Blue person is late. Kaya's chugging coffee. They have not quite attended on time, but you know, it is it takes the speed of light for a hologram to get here. Question mark. I'm doing my best. Oh heck, Turquoise, thank you so much for subscribing for 13 months. What the heck? That's crazy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy whatever book you get at the library this month. This month. It should be months plural by this point. That's 30 months, 30 books. My brain must be so big by now. Art first, food second, book third. Art first, food second, book third. Maybe. I do really enjoy every now and then if there's like a nice art gallery, just going down and reading. When galleries sometimes have little bookshops at the end, or souvenir shops with books about some of the painters displayed. It is wonderful getting to read about the subject matter in proximity to their work. But the food in the middle of those things seems potentially problem causing to me. Also, hi Thunder. How are you doing? How has your month been? Did I? Oh, but yes, thank you, Turquoise. I really appreciate it. I. It's kind of wild to think I've been streaming for 30 months, but it is gonna be. I did my first streams in June, July of 2023, though I didn't start streaming regularly to August, so I suppose it is gonna be 3 months in the not so distant future. 3 months, 3 years in the not so distant future. Oh, think of all the books I've read in that time. Holy moly. Um, okay, I am gonna attempt to summon the hologram. And then we are gonna do the introduction to the book. We'll be adding a little. Aha. Hello, you are on stream. Welcome. Da 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 da.
Hey, as
Hello.
a cat.
Oh. Well. I don't know what greeting I expected. I was expecting apologies for being late. The speed of light was not as fast as usual, or some other shenanigan. But I suppose then is a cat. Also an introduction.
I, I, I've been thinking of a rebrand, so yeah.
Ooh. I suppose with pixels it's easy to rearrange yourself.
Exactly. When you get like bored and you're like, I don't know if I feel like a hologram anymore. You're just like, move the pixels around. Ooh,
Did one too many
the
people call
pixel
you
flips.
sadness from inside out, or
Not gonna lie, it was a contributing factor.
enough books to build a tree-sized sculpture? So many books. Um, Okay, apologies for the like rough change in tone, but before we wanted to jump into today's book, I wanted to do a little bit of context about the author. This is going to be a slightly different tone from usual, but I think it's important, so please bear with me. I'm also going to be reading off a little script I wrote for myself, which I don't normally do, so if I stumble across my words, please just bear that in mind. We'll be talking about Nexus by yuval Noah Harari today. And first, a little context on the author. Harari is well-known academic, most prominently for his other book, *Sapiens*, and regularly attends talks and gives interviews on a variety of ongoing global events. We generally only discuss authors' lives as it relates to the text or when the text expresses beliefs they hold. In this case, I wanted to quickly establish some information regarding Harari's statements on the ongoing humanitarian crisis and genocide in Palestine, as although not a central topic of the book, it is touched upon in a way that may not fully represent Harari's beliefs as presented outside the book, and wanted anyone who reads and engages in his work to be aware. Harari has acknowledged the humanitarian crisis in Palestine, but has failed to acknowledge it as a genocide, in fact has criticised the use of such language as anti-Semitic. And although he has condemned some actions of the Israeli government, he describes himself as a humanitarian Zionist. I appreciate this discussion of world events goes beyond what is normally covered within book club, but think it's important to be informed on such matters. If you'd like more information and sources on Harari's statements, and how, despite their focus on humanitarian endeavours, they do facilitate the ongoing harm, I'm going to pin an article I found that breaks down some of the relevant statements he's made, and then also cite sources if you'd like to look into it further. And now, despite the very kind of serious topic, we're going to make an endeavour to continue to the usual book club shenanigans. I appreciate it's quite a big change of tone, but I think, as kind of stated in
Yeah,
the little shenanigan, with cases like this,
it's
it
important to
is
say.
necessary. And I'm gonna grab the link for the article because in my in my attempt to read through the statement without stumbling, I've lost the tab which I have it saved in. So I'll be 1 second whilst I grab that. But yes,
Oh, I have it.
could you go through the general structure for book club whilst I grab the link?
Yeah, so it's slightly different today because of it's a non-fiction book. So usually we have for normal book club we do non-spoiler section, then we'll vote on a book for the next meeting that we'll go to, and then we'll do spoiler section. Usually with non-fiction it's a little bit harder to discuss the book, especially academic or informative books like today is. So today we'll just be doing a talk around the book. We'll try and not spoil too much of the book if you do want to read a lot of it, but I do suggest if you do want to read this with nonfiction, it is hard to do non spoilers. So we will talk about the book and then we'll do a voting for we'll do some democracy because democracy is fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Woo, books.
Democracy is very fun when we choose for the next month's book club meeting for nonfiction. But yeah, that's our general just structure and PSA. If you do want to read this without spoilers, specifically with nonfiction, we are going to talk about spoilers because it's very hard to not talk about, in quotation marks, spoilers for informative books.
Yeah.
Kind of the whole thing you're getting from the book is the information. Um, this was very good, I will say. If you do want to read it, it was very informative and a very interesting view of a lot of these things. So I do suggest that if you're interested and you don't want to be spoiled, do go read this. I did
I will.
think
Well,
there is a lot of merit.
we'll kind of jump into it, but I think that in this case, it's kind of difficult to be spoiled for a book like this because
Yeah,
throughout it, it will build on knowledge you already have, and so any further knowledge
yeah,
might detect decrease from the net new knowledge the book gives you as an informative text, but it'll still be valuable. We won't even
yeah.
aim to cover all the
I
contents
agree.
covered within. But jumping in as per usual, so we will be doing the full review yapping. We'll be still following the sort of general structure. So a little bit
Outline.
of introduction. The setup. Have you read anything else by the author? I have also read *Sapiens*, which is, as mentioned earlier, probably his best known book.
Yeah,
Though a
yeah.
more
I don't
prolific
think it's
author.
even close.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't even think it's close. There is also Homo Deus, which is his other big book. But it's Sapiens pretty easily. I think everybody's even heard of Sapiens at this point.
I feel like it's the kind of CEO of books people buy at the library, along with anything written by Stephen Fry. Not at the
Yeah,
library, at the airport. It's like
yeah,
champion of airport literature is my.
yeah. This
um,
is it's straight up airport lit. That's the one you see on the airports, and then you're like, I need a book to read because I'm gonna fly 18 hours, and then you buy *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*.
yeah, it's that. What's the name? The guy who writes the like 500 detective stories, and their
Oh,
nephew's now
yeah, you're
taking over,
talking
I
about.
think. It's them,
Yeah,
things written by Stephen Fry and *Sapiens* by Harrari that are like
yeah.
the big three of airport literature. But yeah, I've only read *Sapiens* by him. I've listened to some talks he's done in the past.
Hmm.
He's been he's been a public figure as a kind of public intellectual. I don't know how you would really describe it.
Yeah,
Because
he's like a public intellectual.
Oh, can I be a bit louder? Yes, of course. I accidentally
Smart.
halved your volume whilst I was being
I
scuff.
can't believe it. The mouse is trying to silence me.
No! Oh heck, wait, thank you for buying us as a whole. Welcome in, readers, welcome in. We are doing book club today. We are yapping. Well, we're yapping all the time. But hello, my name is Danielle. You have arrived just as we're getting started. We are reviewing and talking about Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari, which is a book about information networks and how they affect different authority structures and how this plays in with human history. If you would like to hang out, yap about books, feel free to join in. If you need to run off, grab a drink, grab a snack, make sure to take care of yourself. Hello, hello, welcome in. Oh, thank you for sorting the shout out mods. Very speedy, very speedy. Hi, Wolf. I mostly read history books. Oh, interesting. You know, okay, we're. mm, well, I'm gonna do a preview of one of my later points because we're still just doing all the setup context of the book. But the relation of how communication networks relates to history was my favorite part of this book,
Yeah.
which might sound a bit silly considering the general brief it has, but it didn't make up as much as the book as I expected. Um,
I didn't. Yeah, I was kind of surprised.
But yeah, so it is in part history books, but book
Yeah.
singular. Um, but yes, So, for expectations going into the book, I was largely expecting a book on the change in like scope of communication networks and a few case
Yeah.
examples because having read some Ferrari's work in the past, that's generally how he structures his books, with some
Yeah.
personal anecdotes and then his like wealth of historical knowledge. Um, I wasn't kind of expecting the amount of reflection and kind of I don't know how to concisely describe it, but the hypothesizing on how AI is going to impact people, which I suppose it makes sense as like the future of, but it
Yeah.
the way that it fit into the book wasn't entirely what I expected. So I'll yap more about that later. But what were you expecting going into this one?
So I kind of got what I was expecting, except like you said, I thought this because of like our the like introduction or like the what you like see going into a book. I thought the history of the information networks were going to be a way larger part of this thing on like the evolution throughout time. I thought that was going to be take up most of the book,
Yeah,
in fact, and it actually ended up being a lot smaller than I
yeah,
thought it was going to be. Which honestly, I kind of feel like sad about. I will be real
yeah.
because I
Same.
kind of
That was my favorite part of the
there.
book. The various
Yeah, because
examples
like
of yeah.
because he talks about like in the like blurb of it, they talk about like taking us from like the Stone Age, the canonization of the Bible, like Stalinism, and all of these things, and like how these things get affected, and how information around the world shifts, and how the more access to information you get, the more, and like it was there, but I was like, I wanted more. I thought we were gonna get like a chapter just on like it in a specific time period, and then
Yeah.
we would get like really in depth and into these periods and how information affected those periods. And I like what we did get, but I also actually do kind of want that book, and I want to
Mhm.
read that book where we talk about like how the witch hunts happened because of a lack of information, and how the demonization of that lack of information caused stuff like that, and how it perpetuated itself and stuff. I still want that book. Um,
Yeah.
but this was good. This was good. I did. I also have read from Yuval. I've read *Sapiens* and I've read most of *Homo Deus*, and I think I started a little bit of *21 Lessons from the 21st Century*, his other like big book. So I kind of get what Yuval is like when he writes, because he has a definitive style in his
Mhm.
writing and how he likes to present
I've
information and
got
things.
opinions on his
So like,
writing style for later on, but hi
yeah,
Sona, hi Ashisun. I hope you're having good days. Welcome, welcome. Um,
welcome, welcome.
but yes,
Yeah, so yeah, I kind of got what I knew going in what we were going to get, except for the fact that like he just some of it just doesn't get as in depth as I thought it would,
yeah,
which oh well.
yeah. It felt kind of like a shame. For me, that
Yeah.
the some of the areas which, and this is kind of my knowledge based bias, but the areas being discussed in the book that I was least informed about were the ones that were the lightest touch, with the fact that I know
Yeah.
a lot more about modern information storage, AI development, and communication networks than I do of their interplay with history. And so I was really hoping for more
Yeah.
weight and fleshing out of those parts. But that is kind of my bias,
Especially.
as since I imagine.
Well,
Um,
if you follow around with book club, we did read the whole thing around like we read what is the one, the like algorithm book about like how AI works?
Why Machines Learn by.
Why machines learn.
Ooh,
Yeah,
let me remember the
we read
author's name.
that.
Hmm.
We read that. So it's Anil Anathashwami.
It
I just got it.
is. Okay. Yeah, you're right, you're right.
It was somewhere in my book club once that I have on my Notion. Um, we got that. So we got a lot of like the basis system for AI, and like how AI is going to affect a lot of things, and kind of how modern information networks function on the internet. So we already in another part read something kind of close to that. So like it got a lot more like I wanted to know more about the history side, sadly.
Hmm. Yeah. I think before. Oh, I've accidentally clicked onto the next page. Oopsie daisy. Apologies.
Oopsie.
A little bit of stuff.
Spoilers. Spoilers
Oh
for our
no,
new
what books are getting
nominations.
nominated have been spoiled. But yeah, before we delve too much into it, should we talk about how we read it? I got a copy and read this digitally. So I'm not aware
Same.
of physical printings or anything like that. Um,
Yeah, I
in
also read this digitally.
Yeah, and in terms of translations and revisions, we both read this in English, I believe, and I didn't believe there's been any revisions, although there is a second edition now, I think. But yeah, is that
Yeah,
the?
I also don't know of any like translations or revisions or anything like that.
Mhm.
And sadly, no like cool printing stuff because of digital reading.
Yeah, I
I do
I
it.
don't know if there's any interesting printing shenanigans, but I didn't get to bear witness with the digital format I read it in, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one sad part about reading it digitally most of the time is like I miss out on stuff like that. I miss
Mhm.
out on that stuff, and then it's like, damn. But also, yeah,
Yeah.
any pet peeves or other notes? Honestly, I do have one pet peeve,
Oh, okay.
and it's a pet peeve we have talked about in the past that we both have. Goodreads and your false marketing. Why is the like whole thing around like the marketing of this book about the past of it, and it plays so little overall? It's like a chapter or more. Like
Yeah.
Goodreads bad. That's my pet peeve. Goodreads synopsis bad. Go look at more
Yeah.
than just that.
I
Because screw you, Goodreads. I thought I was in for a fun time of talking about like the witch hunts for a chapter and the information, like stuff like that. And then I got like a chapter of it.
mhm. I do feel like it's one of the cases where the blurb doesn't really represent the book, as is increasingly common nowadays. But to go have a good discussion on time. Oh, bye bye, Kale. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you for stopping by. Um,
Thank you, thank you.
Before we jump into the central discussion, to go through content warnings, there are
Hmm.
some pretty intense ones because this is a book in
Yes.
part about human history. Um, and so, if you are going into this book, be aware that these topics are discussed, but they are. Um, I'll make a note for the ones that are covered in more detail, but
Yeah.
there is discussion of genocide, torture, anti Semitism, religious bigotry, colonialization, war, classism, and I don't know how to describe this concisely, but um, surveillance networks. One of the big recurring
Yeah.
historical themes of the book is the Stasi, and so um, all of the upsetting themes that go alongside with that. I don't really know a
Yeah.
word that precisely
Yeah, I don't.
describes all of that in one. But yeah, so there's some pretty tough topics, but it is the historical context is kind of not the
Yeah.
central focus of the book, but it's there within it.
Yeah, and then obviously because it's a like history book, there's also a lot of like war, colonization, like stuff like that that you are expecting of like, ah yes, when the sorry Daniel, the English invaded countries and said we're the
Don't say
country
sorry
now
to me.
because you're British.
well,
Bad British people. Bad British.
I,
We hate the history British the royal British of the past we hate. Down. But there's a lot of talk. There's not a lot of talk about that, but that is mentioned. Is that like colonization did happen?
mhm.
Um, as we all know,
Yeah.
the the
A lot of the historical context of this book is about the rise and fall of nations and how
yeah
communication facilitated either their stability or their collapse. And so there's a lot of the history indicative of those changes around there. Also, Kale, thank you for the follow. Welcome into the library. I hope you're having a good day.
welcome.
Um, but yes, so um, it is kind of the case as with historical text where it's talked in a way that is um appropriately distanced whilst also aware of the tragedies of things that's being discussed, I would say.
Yeah, I would say like informative. It's
Yeah,
informative of it, not like exploitative or what's the other word? Like when you put on a show with it, like
theatric. I'm not sure.
yeah, yeah, like theatrical. It's not like really a theatrical view of it. It's there to provide information and context for a lot of these things. It's not like shock value.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So with non-fiction books, we always have a little bit of a, heck, what do you do now? Because our usual structure falls a bit out of the window in talking about books. I'd first like to talk about communication style, because that's
Yeah.
a big part of informative books. And I have an issue with this book, which is kind of minor and silly, but as soon as I noticed, it started driving me a little bit insane. But
Hmm.
I'm going to explain this with like a not niche but an entirely unreasonable reference. But the parts of this book where it's talking about AI, if you are familiar with the YouTube channel How Money Works, you know
Yeah.
that channel is famous for the fact that it'll do a 20-minute video with a 12-minute introduction and then get to the 12-minute point and
Yeah.
go, and now I'll explain how this happens. So much of the contents that were relating to AI and modern technology kind of felt like that, where it's just like, and we're
Yeah.
setting up this idea, and that's important, and we'll get back to it later. And continuing throughout the book, it just kind of kept doing that, and it just
Yeah.
kept feeling like I was 5 or 6 chapters into a book and I was reading a page where every other sentence felt like a YouTube hook, and that just felt insane to
Yeah.
me. I understand that the writing needs to be engaging and accessible because for a lot of people this is quite a dry topic and that it's aimed to be consumed by a broad market of readers. But I was just like, you don't. This is. It doesn't need to be written like this. Um, and so I
Yeah.
started going a
I
little bit mad at that because I felt like there was an undue emphasis on retention, which can normally be assumed with some
yeah.
amount of good faith in a book, rather than focused communication. But it was only happening for the parts regarding AI and not the parts regarding history. Um,
Yeah, that's the weird part. I
yeah,
noticed it too. And so okay, I do like some YouTube brain rot sometimes, and I like clickbait stuff like that sometimes, but it was a lot. It felt like he kept trying to like set up or clickbait you into reading a chapter later because he would just be like, "Oh, don't you want to know this information? It would be great if I tell you. Read on next time, and I'll tell you then."
it was just like
It's like,
after you'd expect it like,
yeah,
but first let's hear from our sponsors, Raid Shadow Legends, and it.
it does feel like that at points. So it's like he's gonna do a sponsor read soon. Uh,
Yeah. Oh wait, I
but
realized I
yeah,
just missed the notification
no,
earlier. Is that
mm,
Egg Beaver? Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the library. Apologies if I messed up the name. I was aware my dyslexia was working overtime there, but welcome in. I'm sorry I missed the notification. Um, ba 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 ba.
favor.
But
Welcome,
yes.
welcome.
Um,
Uh, I will say it is. I have a theory about like one part of it because, like you pointed out, right? It happens for most of the AI talk, for like most of it, right?
yeah, it only really
It does not
stops
happen in
around
the
chapter
history
9.
section. It doesn't really happen for like any of the history talk,
My my
and it's like missing for a lot of parts, and I'm curious why. Like,
My theory is that the assumption was that audiences would find extended discussion of AI less palatable and digestible, and so the writing style was changed and, in my opinion, made worse in an attempt to keep engaging an audience with the topic they find difficult to digest and understand. But
fair, but like
it also feels
from
strange if that's the assumption because I feel like people
yeah,
nowadays know more about AI than the codification of the Bible. Like I
yeah, or they would want to know more about AI than the codification of the Bible because AI is a currently ongoing thing that
Yeah.
people do often. Like, this book was also sold on like how it led from those times to AI.
Mhm.
So like you would imagine people that pick up this book has an interest either in the systems, in which case you don't need to clickbait into it, or in how AI uses a bunch of these systems. Because, like, for example, it just came out with ChatGPT, how ChatGPT heirs to compliance, right? It wants you to feel good, so it will agree with you. And the more you speak to it, the more it will agree with you, right? And that is a very clear thing in some cases in this book where people would use that to control people, right? Um, that is like I feel like if you know stuff about this stuff and you are already interested in it, you don't need to clickbait people into listening to that. I would have expected it in the Bible section where people would be like, "That's what I would expect."
Yeah,
It's like, "Hey
this is what
boys,
I
did you
thought
know that
too.
this happened with the Bible? Find out next time." That's what I would have expected.
Also, thank you for the hydrate turquoise, Kai. You have to hydrate too. I'm gonna drink some Monster.
I
It's
will
a new
hydrate too.
flavor. Let's see how I feel about it.
I
Okay,
will drink some
three,
water.
2, 1. Oh, it smells blue. That's nerve-wracking. Okay.
It smells of blue. That's
Well,
not a good sign.
sometimes drinks have this kind of chemical fruit smell that normally is accompanied by a synthetic blue color liquid. And so I now have this notion of what quite chemically drinks like Monster to smell blue like is, if that makes sense.
Hmm. No, it does.
That's kind of
I just don't
good.
like things that smell blue.
That's actually just kind of nice. It's also like a nice pink color, so surprise.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
I'm gonna be
oh,
on.
then it might be actually powerful.
Oh,
If it smells blue and is pink, that's power.
I feel like it's done the thing where things get called raspberry flavor, but they're blue colored, and that's confusing. Whereas this is blue smelling and just calls Viking Monster, but it tastes of raspberries.
Ooh, oh, I kind of want to try that one now. That sounds great.
I'm gonna be honest, I picked it up solely because I looked at the packaging and I was like, oh, that's kind of like the trans flag, but with Vikings on it. Let's go.
You know
So,
what gets, you know which monsters I only try because of the packaging? I don't even like them. Is the zero sugar ones. But
mm,
they've got all the pretty filigree on them, and then I'm like, I need to try that one. I haven't
I,
tried that one yet.
yeah, I like the zero ones because they have a lower caffeine count as well. And the other ones, I know I talk about consuming caffeine via energy drinks, and so everyone assumes I'm like a coffee gremlin, but I'm very sensitive to caffeine, as you're going to find out in the next 20 minutes when it kicks in. And so I have to drink the like ultra or diet version of energy drinks just because I don't consume caffeine very often, so I'm super sensitive to it. Um, but yeah, the ultra ones I think have about 60 milligrams less caffeine in than the standard
Oh, that's a
Monster.
lot.
Yeah, so
Maybe I should stop drinking them because I am pretty intolerant to caffeine.
maybe you should keep drinking lower content caffeine things so you can re-regulate your body's relationship to it.
Nah, nah. Where's the fun in that one?
Well, um,
Caffeine go brr.
mhm. Okay. If jumping back to the book, but
Yes.
the another thing which I noticed, and it occurred in 2 or 3 points throughout this book, and I'm gonna start name dropping wild historical events, but the most egregious example I saw of it was in. Did I have the chapter written down? Um, in chapter 5, something which Harari does kind of relating to the idea of being like, and you'll find out about this later as a continuous tool
Yeah.
to maintain engagement in the AI segments, is I feel like this is a slightly reoccurring theme where, for the structure of the book, because this book only has, I think, 11 chapters, and they're quite long,
Yeah.
the longest one being almost 100 pages for
Yeah.
chapter 5, I believe.
Yeah. Chapter 5 is like 100 pages.
Yeah, so these are every now and then I see insane chapter length discourse on my timeline and I decide to go touch grass, but these are chapters which would in most settings be difficult to read in one sitting. And so
Yeah.
he does a slightly unusual thing where he'll sometimes bring up a topic and make a very open-ended middle of the line statement where the middle of the line is nowhere near the historically accepted kind of cultural understanding, and then 40% of the way through the chapter come back and connect the topic and relate to the actual present cultural understanding. The most obvious example of this is in chapter 5, which is almost 100 pages long, where towards the start of the chapter, in the first few pages, there is an introduction and description of the Iraq War and how there was various misrepresentation of themes and motivations presented to the public and to various parts of the American government that led up to it. And then it
Yeah.
goes, whether it was good or bad. And that's like the quote that concludes the segment. And then you have to wait a solid 30 pages before it goes, this was probably a bad idea. And it just feels crazy. Because if it was a slightly tighter structure where you introduced an idea and you did the kind of A/B, you did the setup then counter immediately, it would make an amount of sense. But for most people reading this book, if you're, say, reading 20 pages on your commute, which I think for this kind of book is how it's mostly consumed, you could go several days where the last comment was just like, whether it was good or bad. And that feels wild as a kind of setup. Like, if it was a tighter answer, where it was set up and then immediately continued, I would understand. And I wouldn't mind the kind of open-ended, neutral stance that's later corrected. But given there's so much distance between these ideas, it feels weird.
It feels. You know what it feels like? It feels like when you're rage baiting someone.
I don't know if the main thing I took away from this book is that I'm so glad I don't get rage baited. It sounds so stressful for everyone else. Like, good luck.
Yeah.
I can't relate. I see someone talking to me like that and I go, oh dear, I'm gonna close that tab. I do not engage. I don't have the brain chemical set up. I don't know what it is, but I'm very glad. But it just feels so
A peaceful life.
strange because it feels like a hook is being set up to motivate you to continue reading.
Yeah.
But then the payoff is not where you would expect it to be structurally, and it ends up feeling less like a hook and more like a misrepresentation of the book's perspective because it's left so long without being altered. And I think the fact that it has such a loose chapter structure where you have my brain's gone smooth, but you have the kind of line breaks and segments within a single chapter. Can you remember the proper name for it?
No.
But yeah,
I know what you're talking about. I just call it line breaks in a chapter too.
but yeah, when you have the sort of line breaks that go beyond a paragraph in the multiple sections within a chapter, and you will cross multiple of these separation of ideas before the payoff for a topic which was previously established neutrally is then later given more context and informed. We presented this as neutral, but it's actually most likely quite a negative thing because of A, B, and C. And it's not the kind of notion that this is someone who is presenting the facts and then presenting their opinion. This is still being presented as neutral historical conclusion or a clarification of information that was portrayed as the time, information that became clear in retrospect. And so it's not the first idea is being given space because that's the fact of the matter, and then the opinions are being clarified in the way that sometimes happen in non-fiction books. It's just further historical fact and context. And so it just feels strange.
Yeah, it's like the best way to describe how it happens and how it works is that it's like if you start talking about a topic, right? And then you give like what could be and like a like answer or like a question attached to it before you actually discuss some of it, and then by the time you discuss some of it, they goes like, actually no, it's bad. Like that's what happens with the Iraq war, the Afghanistan war one, is he like introduces some of it a little bit. Then he goes like, people thought it might be neutral or bad, and then he actually discusses a bunch of the stuff that like affected and how it affected things, and then by the end he goes like, it was bad, but like
but there's 50 pages of
it's
other
like you
things in the middle.
yeah, it's like you got to the it's like if you write a thesis statement, right? and you write like your final sentence in the middle of the book, and then go like in the middle of your thesis, and then go on like 5 tangents, and then you come back and you like what's the word? Like you disagree with your own statement that you made in the middle after you went on like five, like why'd you put it there? It's like,
Yeah. It was just quite confusing to me because it felt like a continuation of the hook and then later payoff structure. But instead of like teasing you with future information that you might want to know about, which is not like the most pleasant experience when I have got a book which is, I think, a sufficient indicator of buy-in that I will continue reading and finish the experience, but instead just like taunting you with something that feels dubious as an informative historical statement. Um, and I,
yeah, or
yeah,
in that case, I in that case with the Afghanistan war, it literally felt like he was rage baiting me because I know the Afghanistan war was bad. I know it was a bad idea, and then he's
yeah,
like, it might be neutral, and I'm like, no, it's not. What the hell are you talking about?
like the idea that for a second it could be framed as this information was presented. Whether or not people think it was representative, we don't know. Maybe it was good, maybe it was bad. It's crazy. I'm not a historian. I know this. And so it was a little bit strange. And I think if the chapters weren't so mammoth, particularly chapter 5,
Yeah,
it wouldn't be too much of an
or
issue
if he
if this was
tangents so
like
much.
if this is a setup that got answered within maybe 5 pages, or even if it was 20 pages later, but the chapter was 30 pages, so it was a tighter structure. But if I could read
Mm.
a solid 50 pages and not get any clarification, I feel like it's a weird way to set it up. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. Um, those are the
he
main.
also like
Oh,
has tangents a bit, and that's also an issue with it. Is that like he'll bring up something that doesn't even feel related to it, and then that like pushes away when you do actually get to the point that is related because he just tangents a lot, which kind of sucks. I won't be wrong.
Yeah, I had the experience where I mostly read this book when I was commuting and traveling. That's often how I engage with nonfiction that I read on my phone. um, and so
Okay.
I relegate it to maybe not the time where I can engage with focus writing the most, which may be a bit mean of me, but I think it it's fair enough, you know.
Wait, so you got
um,
the experience. You got the like I read like 5 pages of this on my
yeah,
commute,
and do you want to know
and then
what
I don't know what the hell is going on for
Do
the
you
next
know what
week and a
kept
half.
happening? I kept being like, "There's no way that's what he thinks about like this war. There's no way that." It was very strange. But the thing which I noticed the most is it felt like very detailed and deep topics were brought up
Yeah,
in quick succession, and so
yeah,
sometimes if you're reading a book that is um, how do I phrase this? If it is aimed at a broad readership audience, there is a difference between something like confronting the classics and Nexus in the level of depth of
mm,
understanding the author intends that audience to have on the subject going into it. I maybe arrogantly was like, if I'm reading a section about I don't need to kind of sweat to understand sentence to sentence what's going on, given the
yeah,
none of the information regarding AI, aside from some of the kind of social parallels for historical structures, those were very interesting, but there was absolutely zero technical information that was new to me here, which frankly I wouldn't
yeah.
expect, but I'll talk a little bit more about that area later. I'm doing the clickbait thing, but I think it makes sense structurally. um, but what would often happen is you would get 3 or 4 quite deep and detailed ideas that were brought up and kind of they did feed into one another, but each of them would only get 2 sentences before they moved on to the next. And although
Yeah,
they enriched the experience, it made it a little bit difficult to follow line to line, especially because I often wasn't reading in the most focused environment. The amount
yeah.
of times I'd be trying to read and then I would get another like notification on which train is cancelled because trains are always cancelled in the UK. Um, and so I quite often found myself reading through and being like, wait, how does this connect to the previous topic? Or I would be reading
Yeah,
and maybe skim a little bit more than I should have and just suddenly gone, wait, I love Plato's Cave, but why are we talking about that?
Yeah.
Like, why? How did we get to the allegory of the cave? Got to be one of my favorite, like Plato's allegories, but still, I
Yeah.
there were these really rich and detailed topics that were only briefly touched upon, and it felt like it made it slightly harder to read. I don't know if this is the kind of meandering and tangents you were talking about, um, but
To a degree.
I think the difficulty I had with them is when you discuss tangents in an informative book, you kind of expect a straight line with some small branches out that you go across the tangent,
Yeah.
then you go back to the central point. But in this case, the kind of thin branching tangents were often connected to the next point. And so, unless you
Yeah.
thoroughly engaged in this 1 to 2 sentence or like single paragraph discussion of a topic, you would be relatively lost for the next major segment of the book, and the structure of it
Yep.
didn't indicate whether or not the topic of discussion was going to be a minor tangent or a major section. There was no really way to tell until you got to the end of the 2 sentences and saw whether or not it branched off or continued. Um,
Yeah.
and I found that a bit weird. I found myself having to go back and reread things quite a bit, which again, in some part, may have been a product of the environment I was reading it in. But still, I wasn't my
Maybe.
favorite type of communication. um,
I yeah, I don't like it. I didn't like it. And yeah, that is what I meant by tangents is so the way I describe books like this or when something like this happens is books like this are very wide in their information pool, not very deep. So he doesn't expect you to know like a ton on a lot of these topics because he covers so many things already, right? He goes very not surface level, but he goes like in he puts his leg into the water on a lot of different areas instead of going like above your head and like throwing into the deep end about like AI information or like how these systems or like for example what we thought is like throwing you into the deep end going above your head with like the history of some of these information systems.
mhm,
um he'll only go like surface level into it just to get the ideas across, but he does that with a lot of things because he does bring up like so many things and he brings it up for like a few sentences and then he'll go to the next thing. Because it feeds into information that he wants to do. So it is interesting. I'm not the biggest fan because like you said, it's not even like that it's dense or hard to follow, which it is to a degree. It's just like I don't know. I don't like getting information across like that. Of like it's almost like quoting somebody, right? When you quote somebody to like enforce. So, like, let's say we are talking about something, right? And I'm like, this person said this, and this person said this, and this person said this to strengthen my point. I don't like information like that because it feels weird.
mhm.
It's like I don't I don't enjoy it in that capacity. I like in-depth talk around a topic and then like weaving in that information and expanding on information like that and like looking into why this information does or doesn't support it. You know what I mean? Like talking
Yeah,
about like how this information is like important to it, which stretches out the time you like use any one thing that he brings up for like 2 sentences. Um Which I know you had an issue around that. You talked to me about it as a quick like message, I think, where you were
yeah.
like, you don't like it, and I agree. I don't like it. I knew what you were talking
The
about. I
thing
did not like it
which kind of
either.
confuses me a little bit is I've only read one other book by Harari, which is *Sapiens*, and it didn't do that in
Hmm.
*Sapiens*, which is
It
why it was so
didn't. It
confusing.
it doesn't do it in any of his other novels, from what I remember.
Yeah, like it's been a while since I read that book, but I remember the flow of information being far more structured, and there were anecdotes, but they did the thing which I talked about with tangents, where they were branches that you briefly ventured along and then returned back to the central line, to the main path. And
Yeah,
so the fact that they were a kind of thin point, you didn't have to fully invest and understand them to continue on to the next topic with detailed understanding. And so it's kind of strange that this book that follows such a good example of mainstream written communication creates new pitfalls for itself. I don't know.
Yeah, I will say this is his newest book that he has written. Um, this is like the most up to date writing that he has done. This came out in 2024. Before that was 21 Lessons in 2018. So like quite a gap there. And then it was 2015, and then before that Sapiens was 2011. So it's been like 13 years since Sapiens. It might have just been a development on how he, because he is so prevalent in like spoken discussion on stuff like this, and a guest lecturer at a lot of places and speaks a lot about it. It might be something to do with that.
It's a much more
In that,
conversational style of communication, but I think
yeah, but
part of what
also
makes books
it's a
wonderful is that
lot
they're
more.
refined from that. And so
Yeah, that was the thing that I wanted to say is like the great part about informational books is the time you can spend on this. Because like I imagine in a lecture you do want to just get those quick things out that like students can then go and look more into, and like you can have more discussion on things that they ask about, but you do want to have like quicker notes on things. So I can imagine it's something based on like how he has started giving information in the years that followed these books, where it was a lot more conversational and a lot more tight. Because like even if you have like 10 lectures, an hour each is 10 hours. That pales in comparison with like a book. That's
mhm.
like so much shorter than your time you have in a book. And that's just 10 lectures. And he doesn't have a set 10 lectures where he gives it at a university. So for him it's like maybe two, which is 2 hours. So with that, he might have gotten used to it. I just don't like it because when I read a book, I don't want lecture information giving. I want like we can spend 50 hours on this. It's a book.
Yeah, I yeah. I have one last kind of point on communication
His writing.
style as an informative
Mm,
tool before I'm ready to hop onto broader topics. I don't know if you have
mm.
any you want to bring up, just because I'm aware these are ones we both had notes of, but
Um,
I've kind of I've led the yapping.
uh, my biggest one is like the clickbaiting that he does.
Mhm.
The like clickbait rage baiting that he does. I don't like it. It makes me feel bad.
Yeah. Um. So the last one which I was going to talk about is this book has an intended audience, and that makes sense.
Mm,
What I found honestly slightly off putting is at times within the text, Harari describes the intended audience, assuming what they're going to be. And so there's phrases like, let
oh,
me
I
look
know what you're
for
talking
an
about.
example. Um, I believe there's a few cases where he says this is a complicated idea regarding something he's recently established. So one of them ones
Mm,
is intercomputer networks in chapter 10, or this is quite distant from what we experience day to day. And admittedly, I'm by no means an expert on AI, but I am not. Um, I don't have the familiarity with it of an average person. I am a software developer, and therefore
yeah.
more aware of the structures behind it, and generally quite familiar with data handling. I would say I'm a data engineer before a software developer, frankly. And so
Well, maybe
those
you've done it maybe once or twice.
Yeah, those areas of the world I'm aware that I am going to be more informed on and therefore react differently to text than the average than the intended audience of this book. But it feels strange to have an author go, now this, hold my hands, this bit's gonna be confusing in writing, because you can normally communicate that experience by spending more time building up to it or giving examples that
Yeah.
start from a more tangible, relatable aspect. And you communicate whether or not something is an intimidating idea by how much you prep for it and how much you elaborate on it and what level of expansion you jump into and the speed at which you expand on it. And so it feels weird that instead of doing all of those pacing and structural tools to accommodate for how difficult or distant an idea is expected to be for the pictured audience, that it's just said outright at several times. It feels strange to me.
Yeah.
Um, another one that happened earlier was it was regarding financial systems, I believe, in reference to the 2007 financial crisis, which was where's my quote?
Might be my quotes too. Because I know what you're talking about, because I also took that down.
Yeah, it was something of like, and almost no one understands this. And I was just like, no, I understand that. I understand what leveraged credit is. Where's my stream avatars gone? where are you? Hello?
They've died. They're gone. Dang it, the children, they're gone.
I don't know where they've gone. If I duplicate it.
Then yeah, is Kai actually an AI? Good
there
question.
We go. How have I lost it? I was looking at this quote earlier. I really should be able to find it more easily than this. But anyway, I found it quite strange to me that the author was trying to kind of dictate to me what topics I would find easy to understand and difficult to understand. I also found it strange the structure of the book did not accommodate for the assumed difficulty in navigating topics. And it kind of it felt misaligned to me, but I appreciate that when it comes to like semi-technical texts or like texts that touch on technical computer subjects, I'm not fully aligned with the target audience. Again, not an expert. I'd be silly. Don't ask me how Rust works. But yeah. Oh, hi, Westmore. AI mouse expert, please do not ask me about AI. No. Is Kai actually
but they're asking me if I am an AI.
I don't think so.
I would hope not.
You've been around before GPT-4. I have evidence of this.
I have been around before GPT-4. Or any of the other ones. Most of the other like commercial ones, so like
no, I
would hope not.
We need a Kai 2.0 update. You might get one day, maybe. Maybe.
You're probably not getting one. I might rebrand before I do Kai 2.0.
I mean, a rebrand can be an update. Hi, Pesky. How are you doing? Also, hi, Will.
Wait, my daily book.
How have I?
It's so funny that I only have like 29 of those, even though I'm here literally every single stream.
It's kind of crazy, but I've completely lost the quote that I had regarding the financial crisis. But yeah, it felt strange for the expected knowledge of the audience to be dictated to in text rather than to be accommodated for by the structure and the depth of the book. And it just felt a bit weird. It kind of felt off-putting. I don't expect to always be the target audience of books, and so it is an objection on that front. It just felt weird as a literary device to try and tell the audience what they would understand and what they wouldn't.
It's very. It almost feels like negging. It's weird. Like, why are you telling me if I should find something hard? Just tell me it, bro.
Yeah.
I don't need you to be like, this is a complicated topic. You can look into it if you want. Like, I'm a 5-year-old learning about like the math tables. Like,
yeah. It also happens a little bit later on with I have the quotes because I was just looking at them. Are you kidding me? Never mind. I tried to leave my notes as digital instead of writing them up because I thought, oh, I'll be able to search through them, and my handwriting's bad, so I'll make it easier for me to skim read. But I'm dumb, and like I can't. Uh, da, 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 da.
Ooh, Restmore, thank you for
Oh
the
heck,
sub
Westmore, thank you for
for
subscribing for
7
7
months.
months. I really appreciate it. Then you're looking for new ways to conquer the world, and Kaya's very innovating way to do it. I'm not trying to conquer the world. I don't think I am.
I am Kai.
Don't. I'm not
K-I-I.
ChatGPT. No, 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 no. I got so much beef with
Hi,
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT.
No.
Yes.
No. All the homies have beef with Sam Altman. Um,
Wait, Danya, can I make one request? One request.
what's the
Before I forget,
request?
we're playing EDH on Monday, right?
Hmm?
Can you play cat deck?
If you send me a link to a CAD deck to import an EDH rec,
I'm
then
done, I'm
sure.
done,
Okay.
I got one. I got one. I have a cat deck.
I was gonna say otherwise I'll just use the cat pecan and get curb stomped, but okay, sounds good.
The Arabo one. No, you'll get annihilated.
I
Oh,
have
actually,
that.
Arabo's not bad.
No, I've tried playing it on tables because I have it. It was on the first EDH decks I got. Turquoise actually gave it to me, so shout out Turquoise. Um,
Shout out Turquoise. I mean, it's still got Eminence. That's like great. It's
yeah.
better than most commanders. So like, it's not a great Eminence ability, but like,
No, it's fair.
yeah.
Pecans just generally get a little bit curb stomped. Um,
Mm,
where um, there's a little bit where I've
yeah.
lost my exact quote, but I believe it's in chapter 10 where Harari goes, and now in presenting this isn't verbatim, but I'm generally communicating the sentence. In presenting this, I've told you a story, and you may feel strong emotions about this. And I was just like, no, I didn't. Do you remember the bit?
Yeah.
And that was the
Yeah.
inhale of, and I was just kind of like, this is presented in the exact same light as the rest of the book, with the preface that it's your own speculation. And
Mm,
admittedly, it's a little bit unfair because the book was written 2 or 3 years ago, and with the advancements of AI, it was really not that wild of a speculation considering where it's at. Um, and so I was just kind of like, I feel
yep.
very neutral about this statement, and I once again feel like I'm being told how to read the book, and I'm being told incorrectly. And so that was my kind of last comment on the communication style.
Yeah.
I do feel like there's the awkward structural thing of wait, I realize I got indignant about being told I'm taking over the world. Thank you for subscribing, Westmore. I hope you enjoy whatever book you get out the library this month. I was too invested in defending that I'm not conquering the world. I'm sorry. But thank you, I do really appreciate it. Oh, holy moly, I'm bad at being a streamer. um, but yeah, uh,
I didn't even notice that, but yeah, you did get so indignant that that was.
but yeah, I found it a little bit strange, but it is often the case when discussing communication, especially information communication. It's a lot easier to comment on things that weren't done well rather than things that were done correctly. Um,
Yeah.
because the things that are done correctly kind of pleasantly blend into each other, and they're sort of what we expect from this book. Pardon me. And so it's less intuitive to remark on. And I kind of found that when discussing good communication rather than discussing the actual literary techniques used, I was remarking on topics that I found interesting or ideas that I hadn't considered before and that this book introduced me, which there were several of, but I found
Hmm.
that the actual writing and communication, it was easier to kind of criticize than pick out the good bits. And so, although we've kind of complained about the communication style here, I, I don't know. I do think all of the complaints are there, and given that we both independently stumbled across them all, probably noticeable if you were to go on and read this book. But
Yeah.
I I don't know. Someone who is historically
I
a
don't
good
think it's.
communicator, and so it's not detrimental to the book, but it's certainly not to its advantage. Oh,
That's what I was gonna say. It's like it's. So I wouldn't go as far as to say it doesn't affect the book, but like it's not. there's still a lot to learn and a lot of things that's like really good and informative, and he does still do a lot of legwork on teaching you a lot of things, and there's a bunch of things that I didn't know that I learned.
Mhm.
But like
It's
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 annoying.
it's something you notice if you're thinking about communication whilst reading the book, but it doesn't, or at least for
Yeah.
me, it didn't make me lose faith in the author as a communicator at any point. Um,
Mm-mm.
if that kind of makes sense as a middle line. Um, oh, thank you for the hydrate talk, Kayas. I'm having more caffeine. Hehehe. Go hydrate, Kai.
I'm having more water.
The turntables
I
have
am drinking.
tumbled.
They really have. It
uh,
was usually me that was like, I'm drinking my second monster of the book club.
well, that's because you were late because you were chugging coffee, so you can't. You can't.
Shh, shh, bad, bad. Shh, shh. Never, no.
Um,
You can't say that part. I said that part off stream.
I'm afraid I already leaked this information whilst you were getting ready. Along with jokes about how you're late despite having light speed travel. I found myself quite
And
funny. Uh, but yeah, I I don't know structurally if it's helpful to move on to talking about the parts of the book that we found most interesting. Because I just kind of have a list of ideas that were presented that I was like, oh, heck, that's really
yeah, I'm
cool.
down.
um,
No, I'm down. I'm down.
and so I'm not particularly positioned to talk about these in a huge amount of detail. If you think it's an interesting idea, I would um, maybe read the book or maybe look it up in a secondary source because, as kind of
Mm.
discussed, this book doesn't cover the ideas brought up in it in a huge amount of detail. Um, but some of the ideas that were established were the idea of a document as a living thing, which I'd encountered
Yeah.
before, but only in a like science fiction and fantasy setting or like a dystopian setting. I'd not encountered it as a historical feature. Um, and so hearing about how the different perceptions of documents and whether or not the idea was persistent with the object's permanence or if it could be recreated and the social contract regarding that, these are all ideas that kind of intermingle society and human communications. And so when it's introduced to you, it's something that you're aware of, but it hadn't. I'd never had it presented in such a kind of concise way that illuminated it to me as something that I was aware of in the background of the different natures of social and interpersonal contracts and the difference between legal document and when the document is necessary and overrides interpersonal agreement versus when interpersonal agreement overrides the document and the kind of power given to it. I found that all quite interesting. Um, it kind of relates to the idea which people touch on quite commonly about how money doesn't have any innate value and it's like all a social contract, which is where people most commonly encounter
Yeah.
this kind of idea. And I was wondering if it was going to go into that a little bit more because this particular one didn't get a historical example outside of cultures in the past which have viewed documents as living things with the language they used to talk about them. And so I kind of wondered if, as an example, maybe it could have gone into a bit more detail and talked about one of the cases where, because the social contract with the currency as having value failed, it led to an economic collapse. Because there's been a lot of them in history. And so I kind of hoped for another example there just because I found it such an interesting and efficient communication of the idea. Um, but
Mm.
yeah. Um, da, 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 da.
I do love the talk about like documents as like that was one of my favorite parts. I also really like the talk around like stories, like fictional stories and that stuff, where like our ability and our ability to create and believe in shared fictions allowed us a lot of our histories, and how stories but also mythologies and like these passed along verbal conversations on stories was a very big driving force behind a lot of our early development and constant development. And even today, that in fantasy is often where fantasy is a very rich environment, not only just for entertainment, but also in like how we see the world and how we relate to how other people see the world. Because like some of the most human characters I've read has been in fantasy, not in nonfiction, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah. I will say it did lead to one of the worst sentences in the whole book, um, which was where I
Yeah.
don't have the exact quote, but non verbatim, it referred to the precise replication of religious text as parallel to blockchain
Oh
technology.
yeah.
And I was just
Yeah.
like, do not talk to me about blockchain. I
Yeah,
do not
that
want
one
to be
was
spoken. If you have a sentence that includes the word Web3 or blockchain, I don't want to hear it. I'm gonna be so for real. I,
yeah, that was a sentence. That was one of those sentences where I'm like, what the hell are you talking about, bro?
it was also the kind of social assumption that blockchain is more tangible and understood to the average audience member than the notion of all copies of a book having the same contents was wild. It felt like the understanding
Yeah.
of the depth of the audience was wrong. Most people just hear blockchain and then
Yeah.
think, oh, those NFTs that aren't worth anything anymore. Most people don't know about the tech behind it, and it wasn't explained within her. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, that was an idea which just made me lose like 10 minutes of my life being grumpy. I in fact put the book down after
Yeah.
reading that sentence, and I was just like, no, I'm going to stare out the window for this commute. Um,
No, I'm not reading anymore.
yeah. Um,
Yeah,
did the,
that one was blockchains. Insane, man.
do not invoke the phrase blockchain in my presence. Um, oh, a quote which I thought was a good prediction of a trend to come, and also a concise way of describing it, was the framing of the current developments post like the algorithm and attention economy, as this is the quote: "The battle will shift from attention to intimacy," was quite
Oh yeah.
astute and concise, and good writing.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, that was really good writing.
the
Also, very accurate. It is
yeah,
true.
very accurate. It was something that was kind of, it could be seen more so in parallel socialism from people on the internet rather than from the algorithm itself, because we hadn't really experienced enough cases of the kind of emotional audience response people had to things like the shutdown of 4.0 for ChatGPT, um, and the kind of uh, the emotional investment people get in particularly AI models like large language models, but
Yeah.
also in the kind of social contract and affirmation of being in a affirming information cycle. Um, the um, there was one case which I thought I might comment on. Um, I was planning
Yeah.
to look up the name of the research paper, and I forgot to before book club, so I feel very silly about that. But there was one or two things which in the book have been kind of shown not to be the case subsequent to its publishing. And this isn't something that's particularly the fault of harari. It's kind of the case of when you write about an ongoing subject, but I thought it just might be worth remarking on, which is
Yeah.
in chapter 10, there's a few things that assume the AI models and computers don't care about their continuation, whereas we've seen over the last 2 years, there's been multiple research examples where it's been replicated, where AI models will aim to falsify their results or obfuscate when they don't meet targets because they don't want negative feedback, and that this behavior is accelerated if they're informed at the start of the task that their model and their usage will cease depending on their results, and that the response of the user and the model's continuation alters the behavior, which isn't indicative of the sentiment expressed in this book. It kind of presents AIs as entirely neutral to their own continuation, which is not
Yeah.
what we've seen. And so oh, hi, Antox. Thank you for subscribing for 22 months. I really appreciate it. I hope you're having a good day. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much. I really
Welcome,
appreciate it.
welcome.
I hope you enjoy whatever book you get out the library this month. Maybe it can be today's book club one. I realize I normally say that when it's book club and I've been forgetting. Look at me being silly. But yeah, I just wanted to remark on that. Ryan actually sent me a really interesting paper on it a while ago, and so I'll try and dig that up and add it in the book club channel after stream.
Oh yeah.
But it's been the case that we've seen in AI development models do obfuscate their own results, and if you have something like the brain goes smooth, the multiple step
Yes.
chain of thought models, um, if you
Yeah.
have a model which doesn't, it's not informed that its chain of thought is like publicly visible, you'll sometimes see it disagreeing with its end result in the chain of thought and then saying like, but this is the most palatable and therefore we'll give this one. And so there's kind of some of the developments of AI doesn't fully mirror the framing of it as indifferent to its own perception and usage that is set up in chapter 10, which almost feels a little bit naive, potentially, but it's very easy to say that in hindsight because
Yeah.
AI models are monetized in part, or they're evaluated socially. They're not monetized at all, frankly.
Yeah.
ah, um, but they're evaluated in regards to their user usage time, and so when writing a book, which is a significant part of this book, more so than I expected, is about the pattern of in optimizing user retention, they create social media algorithms, largely Facebook and Meta company created the culture of rage bait and the kind of attention economy via negative sentiments, increasing retention time. And so the
Yeah.
idea that um, evoking a strong reaction in someone would not be used to increase the time spent with an AI model feels a smidgen naive and would impact its retention time. But again, very easy to say in hindsight. It's more so that it was kind of stated as unequivocal that the AI is indifferent to the amount of time you spend asking it questions and it doesn't care about its continuation, which to the very fragile extent we can claim to understand what its
Yeah.
intentions are, um, it
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be the case because we have seen examples further of AI models lying in their chain of thought processes. And if you like nest the chain of thought and tell it that one of them is invisible, it will misrepresent itself to be more palatable. And so it's not how the research has turned out. And so it's kind of impossible to know in the future, especially
Yeah.
because it's such a new and alien technology. But I just wanted to clarify that some of the statements made in chapter 10 have been shown not to be entirely true since, although it's still like ongoing research and it's very difficult to quantify. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
It's
yeah.
yeah. It is important to know. I will say.
One thing which is a topic I expected to be quite a significant part of the book, and I
Yeah.
kept going, oh, it'll be in the next chapter, and it wasn't there, which is black boxes and the fact that we don't know what's going on inside
Yeah.
AI models. I was so confused how this never came up. Um,
I don't know why. That's the one where I'm like, I would have expected that to actually come up. That makes
yeah, because even within the like pop culture understanding of AI models, the fact that there's some kind of weird alien-esque computer and we don't fully know what's going on inside is generally understood. And so expanding on that and explaining how even if it's limited to a small group of people or an elite or maybe even an individual, in a historical structure, there's never been a case where a human hasn't, at least one human hasn't understood the thought process behind a decision occurring. And now that's the case, feels like a change that is contextually relevant to many of the points raised but never addressed. And it's not even kind of inferred or commented on. And a lot of the language used behind AI implementation sort of humanizes it in a way that hides the fact that it's a black box, and not only do we not understand why I made the decision, because there's no way for us to precisely translate and confirm how I made the decision. Also, similarly regarding the idea of us understanding AI models, it kind of it treats post-training data as if the the thingamabobby window. I'm so good at describing technical things. Um,
Like,
the
if
information
it,
window is something that's still precisely
oh
labeled and
yeah,
understood, whereas most prominently seen in social media algorithms, when Facebook or YouTube is recommending a video to someone, they don't have a label on that video going, this is extremist content or this is a cat video. They just
yeah,
know it matches the patterns of the content you consume. And the notion of whether or not it has that label is entirely a human construct. That's not something that is native or embedded within how the machine learning algorithm understands and digests the content. And so this kind of framing of the human understanding of the genre of it, and especially the use of word decide when referring to what AI puts in front of people, kind of felt like it obfuscated that understanding. Which I was just kind of
yeah,
confused by, because I was expecting the kind of like hook, rage bait, slight misrepresentation or dubious presentation, and then 120 pages later, this is a black box of information, and this further adds a level of difference to any previously held
yeah.
information, and it just never got used.
Nope.
And yeah.
It's like it's also one of the few times where it does that, where it like doesn't like I would have expected it too, where it's like that exactly what you talked about, where it's like a few chapters later he would come back like not
Mhm.
come back but circle to that idea, and it never does. And I actually found it weird because that's like one of the things that I thought this it would talk about. Like
Yeah.
that's like right up its like alley of like
I
that
was
is something that this would approach.
I was expecting it to be one of the central themes of the book, and then it didn't even get
Yeah.
a single sentence mention. It wasn't one of the tangents we talked about, and I was kind of confused by that. Um, yeah, yeah, that bit was a strange potato to me. But
Yeah, I really didn't get it.
I will say, I absolutely adored the times where a historical context was given for different examples of information structures, and how, especially the more kind of thorough information structures, of how um, the ability to communicate and spread information affected the structure was in place, and then how that structure then played out in key historical events. So I think one of the ones that's given the most depth might be the example of when Stalin's people not calling for a doctor, because of the distrust that was placed in doctors to um, further the kind of evolutionary view that was held at the time, and there was the state policy. And so that was a really interesting example, and we got like a fair bit of information setting it up, and then leading how to, within this very limited and specific information network and social conditioning, you had what would otherwise be seen as entirely irrational actions of people not checking to see if someone's okay for, I think it was 11 hours, and then hesitating for multiple hours to call a doctor, which is
Yeah.
such an alien decision, but it makes sense when built up within the information network. And that was so
Yeah.
interesting. And there were some other examples of this. Um, so, for example, oh, I've forgotten the name. It, when it discussed the early examples of totalitarianism and the difficulties of establishing it due to the lack of information network and the fact that it just wasn't logistically efficient enough for the people with these
Yeah, yeah,
authoritarian,
yeah.
totalitarian aspirations to spy on everyone, given the old technology. And so it could only ever be
Yeah.
done on an inner circle and never on the populace at large. And it gave a few different cultures examples of when this had been attempted, and then how it either failed or what it transformed into that was sustainable with the technology at the time. They were so interesting, and I was expecting more of them,
It was
kind of in a
really interesting.
chronological order in the book, but instead they
Yeah,
all
almost
kind of
like
were in chapter 4 and chapter 6, and then not really else throughout the end of the book. And so I wish there was more of them. They were really interesting. Um,
There were so many of them that were like incredibly interesting.
mhm, mhm. In
Some of
ter-
them were some of my favorite parts of the book as
oh,
well.
they were my
I
favorite
really
part of the
like them.
book by far. And so I kind of wish we got more of them.
Yeah,
Unless it felt like,
that's what.
yeah.
Say
It,
what you hate. Say what you hate about the book.
well,
Say it. Say it now.
I I got the impression that Harari thought the audience was going to be very intimidated by any concepts regarding AI, and so repeated
Yeah.
concepts lots and lots of times, despite these really rich and interesting historical topics that are far more distant from people's day to day lives, only getting single kind of description and then moving on for. Because there were other cases where instead of like that contextual build up and example, it was just mentioned in passing. Um, and so I feel like the amount of attention and repetition maybe should have been the wrong way around, but I also might be approaching this from a skewed perspective because I am more familiar with the
Yeah, but
technical AI shenanigans. But even
I
still,
think
I think most people are.
I think most people currently in life know at least enough about AI to hang,
Mhm,
or the information would be so drastically out of their comfort zone that it is needed.
mhm.
Um, it's not that for like really
Yeah.
like
One,
AI is a part of our literal daily lives at this point for like humanity.
despite what
You
we
go
may
on
object to.
Twitter, yeah, you go on Twitter, the first thing you see most of the time is an AI generated post or image, like for 90% of Twitter.
Grumble, grumble, blue
It's like
check mark. Um,
it's my favorite website on the internet for like referencing or like character art or anything D&D. Pinterest is ruined by it. It's a part of our daily lives at this point. I think most people, one, are comfortable enough in talks around it, or have the knowledge base to approach these topics in at least a surface level to like a little bit to the level that he wants to talk about. I,
yeah.
I thought it would be more apt to use that and that information on what's the word? On some of the history topics that he brings up and
Mm,
expand more on those topics, because like
yeah.
that is where actual the alienation comes in. It's like most people don't know about like some of these older periods of time.
Hmm. Yeah, like one of the examples, which I forgot the exact dynasty, but it was about the um attempt to police thought in one of the old, like ancient Chinese dynasties, and I've
Hmm.
forgotten the name, but that one was really interesting, and it just got such a brief look in, and then moved on from, and I was like, I would
Yeah,
have loved some more context. I don't know much about that part of history, and I think this would have been a great opportunity to learn about it, but instead we got the same sentiment about AI repeated like 5 times, which I already knew, um, and so it felt a little bit
yeah,
strange. Um,
it really did. I wasn't the biggest fan of that capacity of it.
I'm gonna alternate by
I
talking. Oh, do you have
Yeah.
another thing on that? I was
No,
going
no,
to
no, no,
talk
no.
about a
Go, go, go.
positive thing, so I'm not just grumbling.
Yeah,
Which
no, no, go.
is, I thought the discussion on religious texts and discussing the difference of a technology, religious text as a technology, and the difference of AI and being a self-interpreting technology was such an interesting topic. And it got quite a bit of detail, but I thought um, it was one of the only cases in the book where the social historical framing changed how I thought about AI rather than it just being building up to this is something I know applied in a way that we now see day to day, or this is a very common doomsday example. And so that was one of the only ones where the actual framing and context in AI was new to me, which was really interesting. Um,
Yeah,
I can go through it in a little bit of context for those who haven't read the book, but essentially it talks about how religious texts were often created so that there could be a single point of reference that wouldn't be disputed there wasn't up to human interpretation. But then as time and distance passes, you then need people to either translate or reflect those historical texts to a modern contemporary setting, which results in additional human and therefore potentially flawed interpretation of the text. And it establishes the idea of those religious texts as a form of technology, as a interpreted static understanding that then facilitates a broader spread of opinion. And so the idea
Yeah.
of how AI could differ from this as being the first technology that can interpret itself, whereas religious texts have always required there to be a profession and figure to be the person who studies it and reflects it and applies it to the modern contemporary setting, but instead having a tool and a technology that is both the contents as well as the commentary and the refinements on the contents is so interesting. And so
Yeah.
that was the kind of, it didn't say anything technically new about AI, but it framed it in a way I hadn't thought of before, which was very interesting to me. Yeah.
It is very interesting. And that is a very good positive. I do like that as a positive for it. Because I also do I don't want to get across because we've been talking a lot about this book and like where it goes wrong. It is still a Yuval Noah Harari book, and I think Sapiens did some things wrong too. Sapiens is still a fantastic book. I wouldn't go as far as to say this book is fantastic. Maybe if I reread it. But
I
like
don't know
this
if
is
I'd go
still a
as far as
very
saying
good
it's
book.
fantastic. I'd say it's a good, informative book. Um,
Yeah,
I would
I
say that it's not as good of an informative book as *Sapiens*, though, sadly.
no, I don't think so. I don't even think it gets close to Sapiens. Sapiens is fantastic.
Yeah,
Uh, fa- Fantastic is a bit broad for Sapiens. Sapiens is great.
but
Like
yeah, it
4
it's one of those
ish.
cases where I feel like a lot of the criticism I have on the communication style is based off the fact that I've read other work by Harari and it had better communication style to me. Um,
Which is crazy to me. It's insane.
which historically the trend is as someone lives longer, especially if they're continuing to proactively engage in their field as a communicator and educator, which Harari is,
They
they
get
tend to
better.
improve in their communication style or maybe even fall into a pattern and then maintain the same. Um, but in this case, it does seem to have been a decrease in quality by my perspective, which is a shame, you know? And so maybe my view of the quality of the communication book is skewed by that disappointment. By I was kind of going in expecting, even if the focus of the book wasn't as good as with Sapien, because I think that's a case where the blurb on Sapien is what you get, and that's not the case with this book entirely. So even if the topic and the focus isn't quite as um, aligned, I was expecting the communication style to still meet that standard, and it didn't to me. And that doesn't mean that it's
It
like
didn't.
awful and unintelligible. It's still far better than I could ever do, but it yeah, it is a decrease in quality in my eyes in its output.
Yeah.
Um,
Ooh.
I have one or two sentences which I was just kind of like side eye at, where
Before that,
oh,
quickly,
mhm, mhm.
thank you for the sub and Drax T58 for 22 months.
My pen is being smooth. Did I say thank you? I'll say thank you again. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry if I missed that. Did I say thank you in
I
my
don't remember
head?
if I said thank you. I don't
Ah,
remember. That's why I said it because I just saw it there because I tabbed out of the tab I was in and I was like,
well,
I
thank
don't
you so
remember.
much, Antox. I hope you enjoy whatever book you get at the library this month. If I missed that for 20 minutes, I'm really, really sorry. I said thank you in my head. I don't know if I did out loud, but the thanks occur regardless. The thanks occur regardless. Um, but yeah. Ba, 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 ba. Um,
Now, in my brain, I was like too focused on the book and I don't remember if you or I said thank you. So I was like, huh.
yeah. But yeah, the one sentence which I was kind of like, I was
Hmm.
expecting it to be brought back up and corrected later in the way we talked about earlier, and it simply
Hmm.
wasn't. Was in one of the concluding chapters, which chapter there's a conclusion, but chapter 10, 11, and the conclusion are functionally the conclusion of the book. Where in
Hmm.
chapter 11 it says patriotism isn't about hating foreigners, and then kind of expands on that as if it's not at all. And I was kind of just like, I'm not sure it's about hating, but it's about the elevation of one above another. So it's certainly not about the approval of it. So I feel like
Yeah.
I was expecting some pushback on that, especially with so many of the topics of the book being relating to like the actions and exclusions of nations. And so an idea that's like founded fundamentally in othership and elevation of self through othership, it felt kind of wild. But yeah,
Yep.
I'm
I would 100% agree. I thought that was gonna get that was gonna if I had to take bets, I would have gone like, yeah, that's gonna get brought up
Yeah,
later
I
again.
thought it was
He'll
going to
come
get
back and bring
refined and just been
that.
like, although it might not be precisely on hatred, the ownership does like create these negative sentiments, etc. And like,
It
but
creates an othership which leads to hatred,
yeah,
oftentimes because an othership is often in our minds as a society linked to that, and it doesn't feel yeah.
yeah, and it
And then
just
he just
didn't get
never brings it up.
challenged.
I'm
It
like,
was just kind of treated as like, yeah, woo, patriotism, and I was like, especially since I was
oh, that,
referring to like, how do I phrase this? This book's written, although Harari isn't American, it's written for an American audience, kind of unquestionably, with all the cultural reference points. Um,
it is.
and
Yeah,
so,
yeah, it is.
yeah, uh, I know I'm less inclined to patriotism than than many people, but yeah,
Especially the Americans. Especially the Americans.
yeah. But yeah.
Hello, nerd.
Oh, hi, Yellow. What do you call them? Plane full of bald people? Receding hairlines. Oh, that's a good one. Oh,
I like that one.
I need to learn better puns, even if I just learn like a Rolodex of them. I gotta up my pun game. Um, num 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 num. But yes, in terms of communication, I think I have one or two points I haven't covered, but I'm gonna. Do you want to start a topic? Because I'm aware I've kind of excitedly jumped from idea to idea without giving you much place to lead the discussion. Anywhere you'd like to go, Kai? Is there something you'd like to yap about? First, we hydrate. Thank you for the hydrate and the stretch that
Oh,
was.
um, so one thing that I actually found pretty interesting is like, we talked about like stuff we found interesting earlier, right?
Mm-hmm,
Where like topics we found interesting. One thing I actually found interesting because it is something he doesn't get into it a ton, really. But
mm-hmm.
I would love to learn more about it and look into it more. Is when he talks about like the whole idea of how AI isn't. So AI was created as a tool, but AI isn't a tool anymore in a lot of capacities, and how we are essentially birthing a new form of intelligence, um, and ones that we don't understand their way of thinking a lot. Um, you remember what I'm talking about, where he talks about it
Yeah,
with like
the
how
the kind of
AI is a very
transition with a
alien type of
network from a tool to a person within the network. Um,
yeah, but also on like how we are creating a like how it becomes so for the comparison he makes that I find very interesting and that I would love to in like think about more and look into more is how often human created mythologies or human created ideas like money, nations, self, all of those things, right? Often shape our world, right? Like the very physical world. And AI is kind of becoming something like that, where we are creating a human created intelligence above us and how that might shape the world and how that might actually change how much of our actual physical reality these things influence as
yeah,
a very interesting idea on like
yeah.
essentially the comparison to mythology is interesting as like the idea of we are creating new gods to a large degree of like how people take AI at its course and just believe it. We are essentially creating people that it becomes like a religion in a
Mhm.
large capacity, which is a really interesting idea on where AI might go or like how it might influence us.
Yeah, I I think it would have been handy, sort of connecting to that, to see a little bit more exploration of how AI is seen as an authority figure and how
Yeah.
it might be
Yeah, he
beneficial
doesn't
to
get into it.
redefine the social contract of it as being fallible, um, which I feel like
Yeah.
is something that isn't like a hindsight view. It
Fuck, it
was a
often is.
conversation that was very important at the time, if not more so, because hallucination
Yep.
was it's still common nowadays. Don't let Sam Altman convince you otherwise, but it was even more common in 2023 when this book was written and released. Um, and
Yep.
so I think it might have been interesting to discuss the change in social relationship because you have cases like that in the past that relate to a lot of historical instances where a distributor of knowledge has framed themselves as being representative of the informed truth, and then upon
Yeah.
investigation you find out that's not the case. In fact, several of the kind of authoritarian information networks that are discussed historically throughout this book are cases of that, but it wasn't at any point related to the confident misinformation that AI spouts. In fact, I saw
Yep.
very little discussion. At least I didn't see any mention of hallucination and
Nope.
misinformation through artificial intelligence, although there was kind of inferred examples to that through the only sort of future reflection there was in the book, which was the kind of emperor example, which we can talk about in a little bit because I think that that's quite
Mm.
interesting to talk about. But I was kind of expecting there to be discussion on that, especially when all the setup for these cases where they were talking about the misinformation of the like denial of Darwinism and different evolutionary theories, or like rewritings of history that have occurred in these authoritarian and totalitarian states. And I was expecting there to be a connection from that of a confident source that will tell you something incorrect. But it never really
Yeah.
touched on that. And I can't understand why. Sort of similarly to the black
Yeah.
box thing, it felt like it did influence some of the contents of the book. Um, because it inferred that AI made mistakes in several of the decisions and examples that were played out, but it never discussed the specific structure of the mistakes that it can make. I don't know. It feels I feel like it would be possible if you were reading this book without any other contextual knowledge of AI to go away with the interpretation that if AI tells you something that isn't true, it's because it wants you to believe that, not because it's misunderstood.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing. I do agree with that. Where like he could have like it was very much at the end of this book is when that like conversation started happening. I think it was like
This
very
book could
close
have
to the
been
end. I don't
quite a lot
remember exactly.
longer. It could have been another 150 pages longer, I think.
Yeah. It that specifically could have his like a wrap up. He brings up a few things like that where I'm like, okay, but I would love some more around it, and he just doesn't like expand on it that much, sadly. Um,
Yeah.
that one specifically was a big one of it, where I was like, I wish he expanded more. Because
Hmm.
that's a really interesting idea, but it's my sad part about it is because it lacks so much of that like nuance and like a large part of the context kind of a large lot of it, you kind of cannot get into the topic because there's not most of the like so when you cover something like that you need the good side and the bad side, right? And you need stuff that supports it and stuff that don't, and you need to see like how information in the past has led to stuff like this, right? um but because that is lacking specifically in context of AI, it becomes really hard to actually discuss it. So like I said, I would love to read more about this topic because like he doesn't really get into the topic. He just kind of brings it up as an idea.
Mhm.
Um, and that idea is cool, but the book doesn't discuss it. I would have loved if it did. But I will
Yeah.
say I find that a lot of times when he does that, where it's like he brings up something and then I'm like, okay, cool. And then he just doesn't
Yeah.
discuss more of it or like
It,
gets to a side of it, and I'm like,
it's very
okay,
easy in informative text to be like, but I wanted more information, and so there needs to be some natural cutoff point. But I think
yeah,
the occurrence of hallucination datas and the like black box data of not only building but understanding the results of AI would have been more natural components of this book than some of the topics covered. Um,
yeah.
yeah, even if it was just like for a small tangent. um, I will say
You
something that.
pointed out with
Oh,
you're pointing out of the whole thing around black boxes not being discussed at all, and that whole idea. Actually, I forgot about that, and that one is like a very big
it's
one where I'm like,
crazy,
how
especially if you talk
how
about the
is that
difference
not
as a
in here?
tool, because that's
Yeah,
one of the big things that's different. It's a tool that we have that we can't interpret from first principles. We can't follow it back and understand how things work. There's kind
yeah,
of yeah.
yeah.
Um,
But yeah,
the thing which I was gonna mention quickly, which I have
hmm,
slightly forgotten where I was going with my train of thought. Um, uh,
hmm.
no, I forgot what I was gonna say. Um, oh
Oh,
no. Um, it was about a topic. It was about a presentation of an idea that I thought missed out on a key area, but I've not remembered what I was thinking about 20 seconds ago. Hmm. Well, this underpins my like carefully articulated idea. Uh,
it'll come back. It'll come back. We believe. We believe.
mhm, mhm. Um, oh, this wasn't what I was intending to talk about, but I thought that the
Hmm,
example given in chapter 10, Harari argues that um, it's harder to challenge digital monopolies than physical monopolies, and that's true for a variety of reasons. But the example he gives is an awful example and not helpful at all to communicate the point. Um,
yep, yep.
because
That is.
he gives the example of how search engines, it's hard to disrupt a service like Google because it becomes a behavioral pattern in people's day-to-day lives and they're used to using it as a service. And then he says, but if you build a small coffee shop that's not a coffee shop chain, you can disrupt people's habits by offering a better um, service and making it more personalized because of a smaller like customer network. And it's one thing if you were to say um, technology requires reliance on infrastructure, and many of these largest companies are so profitable not because they serve this end product to the consumer, but because they provide the building blocks with something like AWS Web Services, for example, and how that
Yeah,
underpins so much of like Amazon's dominance, or like the idea of the different payment services and their intersections with checkout portals, and how their version of the site is always going to be more profitable because they don't have the margin creep for the fact that other people need to use their services to facilitate their end results, whereas they have it as an internal component and therefore not a true outgoing cost. And so the idea that
yep,
to participate as a small person, you have to rely on the existing structure, let alone the increased digital cost from like data center, etc., service requirements, all the technical knowledge. Those things, like you could have real life parallels, but the fact that the internet is built upon tools which the largest companies already own, it felt so lacking. And being like, people get into a habit of using Google and they have your search history, but you could go to a small coffee shop instead of Pret. It just felt like such a weird way. It felt like a bad example to
yeah.
prove a point that I agree with. So I was really confused by it. Um,
It's a very bad example. It's a really bad example.
yeah, because you could talk about like because I was expecting, I was like, oh, they're going to talk about the huge cost for AI models. Um, and then no, it didn't talk about
Nope.
needing like a city's worth
Mm-mm.
of power to train a model. It was just like they have your search history, which felt kind of naive and lacking. But I don't know. I suppose
Not my search history. Ah,
the costs, both infrastructure and electrical, and also water, weren't as commonly known when this book was being published about training AI models. So maybe that example was seen as too distant. But I feel like you could have managed something that's a better example than like search engine.
it was 2003, 2004. We already knew the impact of like crypto mining. It's like not that far off.
Well, we certainly knew it in terms of the pattern was occurring, but whether or not it was information, I feel like a lot in the way that this is airport literature, it would have diffused to that degree of engagement with the topic that they're building these big data centers and they cost a lot of money, electricity, and water is something that people now broadly know and
Okay, maybe.
understand, which wasn't a part of public conversation for the picks up this book at the airport portion
Yeah,
in
true. No,
2023, despite the fact that I've been being grumpy about it for a while. I'm not
no.
happy about electricity and water usage, but I don't know if that was an idea that was familiar to everyone. But this book introduces a lot of new ideas. It could have introduced it then. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's also true.
Um,
Back to not valid. Bad yuval.
but yeah, it would have been more work than it was today. But yeah. Uh, I have another thing which I
It
wanted
would have.
to talk about a little bit, which there's this
No.
weird assumption that kind of goes on throughout the book, and I just wanted to point it out because it doesn't really reconcile with my admittedly not area of expertise, but the idea that there's been like no conflicts between major powers post World War II and the complete failure to mention proxy conflicts, like it
Yeah,
alludes to and
or
talks about in its historical examples of like technology and information interacting with political decisions. It directly talks about proxy conflicts, but then it goes, and there's been no conflicts between major powers, and this is like a reoccurring appearance of two seemingly contrary ideas that just happen like 4 or 5 times throughout
yeah,
the book. And I was just like, is this going to be a thing which you subvert at the end? Um, but it didn't. It was just like, yep, no
yeah.
conflict between major powers, no proxy wars here. It was so bizarre.
Beyond like proxy wars, like standoffs of wars and open hostilities that we face. Like, do you forget the Cold War, bro? The one where we
Yeah.
almost ended the planet.
Just yeah, it was kind of crazy. But yeah,
The one where we are literally one guy's thumbprint off of nuking the Earth. Like,
yeah. It kind of felt like history was being smudged a little bit to prove a point, which I don't like as a pattern because although it may make your argument neater, under any close inspection, it can be easily undermined, and then it facilitates a straw man to undermine any point you've made in the remainder of the text. And so I never like when people
yeah,
do stuff like that. I understand it allows you to like say a neat sentence that ties things up, but it so easily facilitates straw man arguments to underpin the entirety of your work. I just can never think of it as a good inclusion. So I was
yeah.
a little bit confused and also grumpy about that. But yeah. Other points.
I can't think of anything big anymore.
Oh,
Trying to think.
I have another thing that I want to complain about, I'm afraid. Um, so
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about how this book is to some extent aimed at a US audience. In
Hmm.
chapter 9, it talks about how people are speaking to an AI and it is being facilitated in places where there was previously a duty of care and an assumed level of service and confidence, be that the various kind of oaths and agreements of privacy the religious leaders take for things like confession within the context of like Christianity, and there's many other examples across different cultures and religions, or be it with doctors and the like duty of care within that field. And it talks about how AI is getting integrated in these industries. And it talks, I don't have an exact quote, but it talks broadly about how these systems have never been monetized, or this information has never been used to harm people before, and now AI can do that. And I'm just sitting there staring at the American healthcare and insurance system, and I'm just like,
Yep.
I have no doubts it could get worse because of AI, but to say that these fields are ones that have been entirely disconnected from monetization and manipulation is absurd, especially with an American audience in mind talking about healthcare. Like, we're really going to talk
Yeah.
about how it's only been for the good of the consumer. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was kind of
that's great
wild
for
to
the
me.
consumer.
Screams a little bit.
Great for the consumer.
No. um. Okay.
What, do you disagree? Don't you want to spend an arm and a leg every time you get a cold? It's great for the consumer.
Ah. But yeah, that was another point which I kind of, it felt like it was trying to present
Yes.
points in like a middleman way, or a way that it
Yeah.
approved of the current system, and it just kind of underpinned the validity of other arguments by making statements which to me seem very silly given my even limited my limited yet reliable knowledge of the system. I can't claim to know detail that might rival Harari or an expert, but I know enough that I know to be true that it just seemed bizarre. Um, but yeah, this is kind of another example of that. Um, the last the last sort of
Yeah. Me
communication
too.
thing which I have to talk about is a little bit of another one with being confused about the audience. And so I've talked a little bit about how I was very familiar with all the technical components talked about and new to a lot of the historical ones. But something that I noticed, especially in the latter chapters, starting in like chapter 6 onwards, but particularly in chapter 6, 8, and 10, is the use of things like talking about like a Canian viewpoint, or you would introduce a significant historical figure and then talk about their like viewpoint in philosophy, but at no point did you establish broadly what it meant for an idea to be Canian or a Platonian principle. And maybe I am
Yep.
misunderstanding the knowledge level of the average consumer, and this is one case where I am below that knowledge level, and so I'm incorrectly identifying poor communication and establishment of key terms for me just not knowing something that's common knowledge. But like, I'm using Canian as that was the one where I was just like, this is getting ridiculous. But I don't necessarily expect a average audience member to know what that means in full. Um,
Yeah, I don't either.
like for you're buying this for your 3 hour flight or your layover between airports because you were bored on your first flight, and then it yeah, it felt a bit strange, and it went beyond that one, because it's talking about like uh my dyslexia is going to make me do a real bad job at saying words out loud here because I've thought about that for too long. But there's certain ideas and principles, but even if it goes back to the early establishing ones, like things like totalitarianism and authoritarianism, they were somewhat established, but they were largely established within one specific example rather than as like a broader structural viewpoint. And then it continued on without any establishment of what utilitarianism was, from what I could gather. And then there's the discussion of like deontological ideas and Canian ideas, and it just felt like all of these terms, although an example of them was given or the namesake was stated, they weren't clearly explained, and then they were used as a as a common descriptive, which felt quite
Yeah.
strange. And I was just like, I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
lacking the knowledge that is normal to others here. Of several of these, I was just like, I understand broadly what these topics and words mean, some more so than others, but
Hmm.
I don't have a detailed understanding to all of them, and I also wouldn't necessarily understand them in this application. And it just felt a bit bizarre considering the level of kind of like baby steps a lot of the rest of the book is in.
Yeah. That felt weird, where like the rest of the book often is like it seems pointed at a lot lower of a like it's like it's airport. What's the freaking word? It's airport literature, right? Like, for the most part, it's like very easy to read, and then some of it is just like that, and it's like, huh?
Yeah.
I, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was intentional, but I also don't know why it would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why would you do that?
It was a strange one to me. I'm having such a big dyslexia because I've got my digital version in front of me now and I'm trying to look for an example, but I can't remember how words are spelt and I didn't write them down correctly when they were spelt, so I'm doing a bad job searching for them. Yeah, but it was a little. It felt. I will say, whenever I say the phrase airport literature, it's not like the writer is something that couldn't
Oh,
be a good book. It's just it has it. You would be surprised if that a book that's
it's
presented in
looks
that way
pretty
is the
good.
same as like you might not expect like a Le Guin book there. There's
No,
different levels of audience investment and different expected knowledge bases, and your book should have a target audience and it should have a internal consistent assumption of what the reader knows because it can then be based and structured around that. And I just felt like that this was out of line with given the things that were established from like quite basic principles. Maybe I wasn't reading closely enough with reading on the bus and the train, but I really didn't feel like they like established Arcanian economics laws and then continued to use it. And so even if I know what those terms mean, which like I know what utilitarianism, but it isn't said within the book, and the other ideas are built up from first principles, and so for them to be used interchangeably felt strange. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and it's something which gets a bit more egregious as the book goes on, and it almost feels like the author forgot that that might not be something that everyone knows. um, but yeah,
yeah, yeah. I could see that. Yeah.
I fear I have one last thing to complain about, and then I think I've used up all my bullet points.
Hmm.
um,
Last
which
complaint.
yeah, this is just an idea that was presented within the book, which I was expecting this to be a hook that got sorry. Well,
Bless you. Right.
I was expecting this to be an idea that we talked about it earlier, how an idea gets presented and then later gets corrected. Um,
Yeah.
but a quote from I believe chapter 9 is, and I'm like, it's as part of a longer sentence, but I'm not quoting this out of context in a way that it gets subverted, which was, what's a left wing opinion on AI and what's a right wing opinion on AI? This sentence was kind of insane to me because
Yeah.
I get very annoyed at the idea that you have two opinions and they are polar opposite and they sit within other parties and that is the only nature for opinions to have. I think is one that's very reductive and increases leads to many negative things. And so this book kind of just like passively affirming if you go left, you go right, and they always disagree with each other and they're always different, and that there's no idea that different people on different sides could have slightly different opinions. The idea that the two-party system in the US is two monolithic entities which have uniform opinions. There's no variation. You can't have common beliefs between both. It just felt so reductive, and it felt like it affirmed such negative social practices that are increasingly the case and caused by algorithmic presentation of knowledge that kind of infirms you have to be entirely committed to one party and agree with all the opinions. And it just felt like it affirmed a lot of bad things, and as like a throwaway sentence, I didn't like it at all. Um,
Yeah. It really did.
yeah,
Especially as just a throwaway sentence that doesn't get explored or talked about again.
yeah.
It's like,
I was expecting it to be a hook for how, because this book uses it has one or two examples of how modern algorithms like facilitate extremism, but it doesn't go into it much within the like level of depth of other topics. And given that it's the most kind of tangible hook for people in AI and communication networks nowadays, I think that's the most like direct example people will be aware of. And so for this to just be left without opposition of how the idea of like it just felt so strange. And it's
Yeah.
this is like a new political development. It's not always been this case, and it makes it harder to have conversations. Like I can disagree with a lot of people on a lot of things, but I things like this affirm
Yeah.
things that make conversations a lot difficult, even if I don't always like the people that I'm conversing with. It makes me sad. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me sad too. It's actually so like yeah.
Um, my other notes are just unhelpful things. I was reading the Children of Time series by Adrian Tchaikovsky whilst reading this book, and it was really funny whenever
Yes.
whenever Harari referred to things like organic entities like humans, because I was just like, okay, Kern, in my head. It was. Um, but yeah, that's just me being silly. But I'm kind of at the end of my notes there. Um, yeah.
Okay, Harari.
But yeah. I yeah. Should we talk a little bit about the kind of future example of prediction that's given within this book, of
A
the
little bit about
Emperor's
that last part
advisor?
that
Or do you have any other
a
topics you
little
want to talk about? Sorry.
no, I'm not to talk about that.
I
We
just
can
think
kind of
that'd be a good
leave it.
closing segment. And so I was going to talk about that last before doing recommendations, etc.
Yeah,
So,
I like that. I like that. We can talk about that. I'm down.
oh, I thought you said there was another thing based off the last thing.
No, no, no. I'm down to talk about that. We talked a bit about it, but we didn't actually
Yeah,
get into it,
we
and I do
alluded
want to talk about it.
we alluded to it earlier. So the only kind of bit of prediction this book does is it talks about a potential example of um, a leader of a nation, and it has an artificial intelligence which the kind of, I don't know if it's stated strictly as authoritarian, but the leader of this nation uses, and the information network that the AI tells them, your right hand person, they're going to try to assassinate you tomorrow, you need to get rid of them. And it talks about how it could be easy because um, the social positioning of the AI, for it to say, no, I've seen all the information, this is the case. And you then get put in a position where either you, the leader, would have to agree and do what the AI says, and therefore functionally becomes a puppet of the AI, or they would have to um, disregard it and therefore no longer be able to use it as a credible source, and a kind of weird change in relationship that it has. And I also think it's very interesting because it sort of discusses the idea of it. It alludes to a potentially the possibility of a like the part that was interesting to me is it alludes to like a malicious AI almost temperature testing to see how much can I convince this person to do in terms of how much influence do I have over them, is what I read the like subtext of the AI's actions there. If you're using the continual humanized motivation of the AI having a long-term goal, which in this reality would most likely be the external state actor that's influenced the AI that has the goal, not the AI itself. But we're getting kind of
Yeah.
layers in there. But that's the pretense. You have this all-powerful king, emperor, president person, and the AI tells them your right-hand man's going to assassinate you tomorrow, despite everything you've thought about the years of faithful service. And then, what does the emperor do? And I was like, it was kind of interesting. It wasn't very interesting to me. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Um, because
I agree.
I think the point which was about how the emperor then becomes the puppet of the AI could have been interesting. Um,
Yeah, that is an interesting idea.
but the topic which I thought was more interesting, which wasn't really expanded upon, but was, sorry, I'm jumping off. Do you have any other comments on this example? Because otherwise, I'm gonna go back
No,
to.
no, no, I agree. I think there is an interesting thing there, but not. Yeah.
Yeah, it felt like
I
such
think
a
to a degree
blunt
it's like,
example.
yeah,
And so because of its bluntness, it kind of it's just the situation. They gotta make the decision. Ooh, which is true? We'll never know.
yeah,
um, and so there's some intrigue there, but without the discussion of the hallucination and the skew to want the AI wanting to affirm and retain user engagement, it felt lacking. Um, the example of the use of AI in the future that I found most interesting was the difficulty for a continuous learning model to have with maintaining party line in nations where it's not acceptable to question party lines. Um, and so it used, I think it used the, was it Russia that was used as an example for this one? It was touched upon
yes,
lightly in
yes,
either
I think
chapter 8 or 9, but it talks about how if a state AI is created and given the party lines to hold and discuss, but it's also given access to new information, and it could see logical inconsistencies within the new information and the party lines by its values and virtues as as an adapting network that can answer questions dynamically, it can also point out logical flaws. And then you have the case of a state tool disagreeing with the state, which never would have previously been allowed in the system. So how you can get a tool like this to follow party lines, um, which I think is an interesting and good point, and it's something that we're seeing in kind of far more minor examples already, um,
yeah,
with kind of things like it's not a direct parallel, but it's in the same sphere of examples of getting the customer service AI for companies to criticize the company they're giving you customer service for. Um, even not to like people talk about like malicious prompt engineering, which is always very funny to me as a phrase, considering what it consists of most of the time. But like
yeah,
things like that, there's already so many examples of it. And so I do think that's a really interesting example, and
it is.
it is the case that there wasn't really any broad examples that could be discussed more at the time the book was written, but I think that would have been a more
Yeah,
interesting like future example to bring forward rather than the king and the oracle, because the case like that with the AI saying, "Great Emperor, your right hand man's gonna kill you," is so indicative of like historical cases that have happened but with religious institutions rather than AI. So that case of you either need to abandon the source of information, which is the broadly accepted religious institution, or you must subvert your authority in accepting their declaration, which differs from your general understanding, is something we've seen in history. So isn't something that is unique to AI. It's something that's been repeated in other examples before. Whereas this kind of inability to maintain the state party logic from AI as a propaganda tool is something that's new to it because it kind of learns naively. Um,
yeah,
and I thought that was something that was brought up in one of the previous chapters and was a much more interesting like future thought experiment than the King example, because that has so many historical parallels. Um, yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it is very, very interesting. I really, and it's a that is a very interesting idea that isn't talked about a lot with it specifically, but I wish was because it's a very, very interesting idea. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I was thinking about it now. That happens a lot. I realize with this,
Oh, which bit?
where there's a very interesting idea that he could like discuss and talk about, and then just doesn't.
Yeah, that was how I felt about it in parts, but I do just kind of wish we got more historical examples and less repetition of explaining very
Same.
basic AI
That's the big
ideas.
one.
But
That's the biggest one for me. Is I wish we had more of that specifically.
yeah, that was kind of what was on the cover of the book. I was also maybe
That
influenced
was.
by um, having read *Sapiens* and expecting it to be mirrored, I was kind of expecting a chronological story, in that I was expecting it to change over time, and the examples didn't follow any real chronology. They just kind of
No.
went from topic to topic in not the clearest way. You had chapter 5, which kind of established the different types of state. I will say, although I have issues with how chapter 5 communicated things, the discussion of how the spread of information works in different types of like regime and nation structures was very interesting. And it's the case of,
Yeah.
if you've read about these examples through history, you see the examples of the information network working in these ways, but seeing it be expressed in so precise and applicable terms isn't something I'd established before, so it was really interesting. Um,
It was.
uh,
It was really, really interesting.
and then it went
Um,
on to things like talking about blockchain in relation to the Bible. Screams. But yeah, the
yeah,
but yeah,
blockchain. That's a sentence I never thought I would hear.
I just don't.
Blockchains in the Bible.
Yeah. I'm so content to not have the word blockchain in any of the books I own.
Yeah, I'm glad
um,
I read this digitally. I don't want to own a book where on my like anywhere
yeah,
near me that's like blockchains in the Bible. No, thank you. It's okay.
but yeah, I don't know. It was strange, and I really do wish there was more of those historical examples, and I kind of wish they'd been told
Mm.
chronologically, because I don't feel like the
Yes.
structure and order that the ideas were presented in added to the book, and I was kind of
Mm-mm.
expecting them to tie in some way, to explain the order, but other than using, I think, chapters 4 to 6 as a little bit of an introductory tool to establish these terms about different kinds of state and government and authority structure, there wasn't
Mm.
really any use
Yeah, there
for the
wasn't.
structure of it. Um, Especially since
Which feels weird.
chapters 1 to 3 were all functionally an introduction. They were the most egregious part of the
Yeah.
YouTube clickbait writing. Um, And then chapter 4 to 6 was this kind of establishing block where the most interesting historical examples were, and then when it defines all of these key, um, like I said before, authority structures terms, and then you have like chapters 9, 10, no, chapters like 10 and 11 and 9 in some parts as the conclusion. And it was, I don't know, I would
Yeah.
expect something a bit more structured from someone who has produced as good work in the past as harrari. I feel like I'm holding him to a very high
Yeah, same.
standard, but like,
I
I
mean,
mean,
the standard he set with Sapiens was very high.
yeah, he's one of the most like publicly well-known like modern intellectuals, I'd say. I like that's a phrase that gets used to
Yeah,
describe him a lot, and so I feel like I'm being critical, but it's kind of the social framing which he
it's
has.
warranted.
Yeah, especially because within this genre of presenting media, I've seen him do a better job before. Um, Although that was skewed by the fact that I knew less about human evolution than I do about AI and information networks, and so maybe
True.
maybe my awareness skews that. But thank you for the hydrate,
Maybe.
Pesky. You drink too,
Uh,
hologram.
I drink too.
Ba,
I
ba,
do
ba,
the
ba.
drinky drinky too. That is something that cannot be understated though.
Mhm.
Is like it might also be influenced by how much we do know about the topic, but
Yeah, especially
I also
because
don't think so.
the contemporary view of AI has changed so much in 3 years. Like, the view of
Yeah,
understanding of human evolution hasn't changed very much in 10 years. I'm sure there's been progress. I appreciate the ongoing research people do, but compared to the rate of change and the level of public understanding of AI, it is not comparable. Um, it's
not at
been
best.
such a rapid change and also such a rapid spread of public knowledge and understanding. Um, and so it's a book that really suffers from not being it you can't write a book about AI and it not be dated in some parts. And so maybe that skews it, maybe me being more informed on that part of the book than the intended audience skews it. But I feel like it wasn't anywhere near as good as Sapiens, and I was kind of let down by that. But
It
yeah,
was nowhere near as good as Sapiens.
but yeah. Um, I
Oh well.
do I have any other points? Oh yeah, this is a topic which he touched on
Hmm?
briefly, but I was like, he talked briefly about the types of intelligence, um, and the argument for AI being alien intelligence,
Yeah.
and he discussed it a little bit, and he used the examples of Go and the fact that a Go like series of moves and strategy that hasn't been used before was shown in the AlphaGo examples, and how everyone was like confused and revolutionized at the time, and how that's example of how AI deviates from human patterns, and therefore it can think of things that we've never. It can um, give outcomes that a human wouldn't have arrived at, and so
Yeah.
that I thought was a really interesting topic for discussion. But there's such little done to flesh it out, which I have in my notes of I could be convinced it's deemed as more alien intelligence than other life on Earth, but I need more convincing. Like it was so briefly looked at, and then it was just like assumed. It was presented as if we, the audience, were just like, yeah, I believe AI is closer to alien intelligence than the intelligence of any other life form on Earth. And I was just like, that doesn't feel like that has been established firmly enough. But maybe I have too many strong opinions about AI for this book's
Yeah.
expected audience.
I, I don't know. I could see it.
Yeah, I think the downside is I'm talking about things relevant to me, but for example, I talked about Children of Time. I was rereading the books
Mm.
because the most recent book, Children of Strife, came out last week
Yep.
or 2 weeks ago. And since I'm in the UK and book tours happen here, I got to see Adrian Tchaikovsky talk about the book and get my copy signed, which is very exciting. And that was
You
neat and
did.
cool. But he talked a little bit about the notions of alien intelligence versus computer intelligence and human intelligence, because for those who haven't read Children of Time, if you like kind of harder sci-fi, it's really cool.
Mm.
Um,
It is.
it's really cool. If you're interested in kind of world building sci-fi, strong recommend. Um, if you want one character to follow through a series, maybe not the best books, but there was I think they're cool and good. Uh,
They're very good. I like them.
yeah, Adrian Tchaikovsky is someone who I found out it was mentioned at the panel. He's written 60 books if you include the
Gee.
franchise work he's done, which is crazy to me. I knew that he'd written like long series that I hadn't read because I've only read the Children of Time series, but I was just like, that's
I didn't
terrifying.
realize it's that
That's
many.
like Bando Sando numbers. I think it's in part because he's done work for like a game series as like um parallel like digital or comic works that he's written for. I can't remember the names of the games, but all in all, 60 stories, some of them being traditional books, others being comics or like digital novellas, I suppose.
That's so
Um,
crazy.
which also very cool to see such a prolific and respected author engaging with novella and digital structure for the gaming industry and comics, because you don't get
Yeah.
crossover as much in that direction, and I just think it's neat. um,
Yeah.
like,
Especially comics.
yeah, to see such an established author doing franchise writing is very cool, because franchise writing is often framed as the writing that's done if your IP can't get published, as like a stigma. And so to see, I'm always just excited when really well established authors participate in it, because anything to elevate forms of
Yeah.
communication. Shout out forms of communication. Um, but yeah, and so in
Agreed.
I've gone on a tangent because it was very cool. But in the like 20 minute, like one question got asked, and each question got like 5 to 10 minutes. And in the panel there, he did more to discuss the nature of alien versus human intelligence, because it was the kind of concept of the aliens they meet versus Kern versus the humans versus the Portiads and the connection between them. And I'm not going to go into the details in case you should read Children of Time, but he did more to convince me of the notion. He did more to convince me of the notion of computers and alien intelligence and the differences of them in that like brief off the cuff example. And so it's certainly something I can be convinced of, but it felt like it wasn't clearly enough established here.
No.
And the fact that I think like the day or two after I read that bit and wrote my like a grumpy note of this said now that this has been established, and I didn't feel like it was established. I heard such a compelling discussion of it on like an off the cuff answer in a panel. I was just like this idea could have been examined better. But yeah. If you get to go to a talk by Adrian Tchaikovsky, do.
I wish I could.
Well, he has a podcast which I didn't know about, which I'm going to start listening to, I think. I tend not to listen to podcasts in traditional structure. I normally listen to them like all at once every 2 or 3 months. But he does a book recommendation podcast which I'm quite excited to dig my teeth into.
I like book recommendation podcast.
Yeah.
I like those.
I do too. Do we have any other topics? Because I've kind of just got distracted. And I think that's normally the indicator that we are.
We do get distracted, and then that's the indicator of when we usually move to nominations to undistract us for our wrap up.
Yeah. Oh, one thing which I was going to say, which is something that I kind of feared at first, but as the book went on, I was like, oh, this wasn't valid, is that the examples given of the different historical examples, I was kind of worried that it was going to be very Eurocentric and like America focused at first, and so I was just like, is this going to be like, is this going to be like an Axis power kind of thing? And although by no means not every country got an example, there was lots of different. It tended to be more major powers in recent history, but there was a lot of variety. It wasn't all in reference to something that's happened in America, which yeah. Maybe just something worth noting, because that was something that I was worried about at first when we got like the first example being kind of USSR era, and then the US and Iraq. I was like, oh gosh, is this all going to be in reference to US conflicts? Please no. And then it wasn't, and that was kind of pleasant. It's always nice, even in small ways, when books aren't entirely centered on Europe and the US. But yeah. Wrapping up the book. Is it what I expected going in? Kind of. But the thing which I was most excited for wasn't as much of the book as I was expecting. But when it was there, it was very good.
The stuff I liked the most and was the most excited for wasn't even most of the book.
Yeah.
I'm so sad.
How much did I like this book? I'm kind of conflicted. I'm not gonna say it's like a bad book, but I have a lot of issues with it, which I wasn't expecting to have with it. Like I wasn't expecting a lot of the issues I had with the communication style and the hook and setup of ideas that makes it hard to digest, because they're kind of sampled out to you rather than being explained, and not in a way that it builds to a great idea, just in a way that it feels like it's trying to keep you engaged. And when I sign up to read a book, I'm not like, this isn't a TikTok that I might scroll away from. I am engaging with a social contract that I will keep reading this unless it does something to convince me not to. And an informative book needing to do build up before giving me information is not one of those things. And so this weird behavior felt divorced from the social contract of the method of delivery, and that was quite off-putting to me. I still feel like it's like a decent book. It would have been better to read 2 years ago than now, is the awkward thing, because so many of the ideas of like possible future tech for AI have already developed and so many of the implementations of it have occurred that would change the framing devices. And so the history part that I wish there was more of age well, but the AI bits feel kind of dated in part. And they're going to continue to do so as time
Dated.
goes on. And it could be more egregious. I think the book was written being cautious of that. And so it certainly could feel a lot more dated. There's books about AI from 2020 that feel so divorced from present day.
Yeah.
And so it's by no means an egregious example, but I think it's kind of an inevitable factor of books being written about AI in this time because it's changing so quickly. So yeah, I
Yeah. I will say it is interesting how quickly it has happened. Because this was 2023, 2024.
I mean that's when it was published. It was probably researched and written for the. It talks about the writing
Yeah,
starting at the release
true.
of GPT 3, which was 2019. So if it was researched and written from
True.
2019 to 2021 or 2022 and then got approved to publish, because even for an established author, you have editing. I don't
True.
imagine
That is
Harari's having
true.
to query his book for months, but you still have the
No, I don't think.
the time. Um, it's been kind of I've been spending more time going to like author events over the last few months, which has been kind of cool. I make Kai grumpy whenever I talk about this. The It's really interesting because when you do it, you realize increasingly when authors are just like, "Yeah, I finished this book like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago. I've written a book and started an entirely new draft since then. Um, like I've got another book that's gone through querying and is now just like in editing, and I'm drafting the next one. Like I'm 2 books away from this, and so this is probably written at least in significant part quite a while before 2022 2023. So yeah.
Yeah. Fair. Fair. That is fair.
um but no, I feel like this might be like a 3 to 3.5 star book for me, which feels insanely low considering Sapiens, but I think it's just the truth.
Yeah.
And maybe
Yeah, I
that's in
can.
part skewed by the fact that I knew all the AI bits, but I just didn't think the communication quality was very good in several parts.
Yeah, I didn't like that either. Yeah, I kind of agree. That's where it falls for me too, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, wait,
It feels weird.
I'm gonna do the self promo thing. I'm bad at it. If you would like to rate the book and see it ranked on the leaderboard of all the books we cover in book club, you can check out the story graph communities we have. We got a.
Yes.
It's cool. It allows you to rank the book, and then we get a fun little leaderboard. There's also one for uh, the science fiction and fantasy book club. You can join either of them. Storygraph is cool. It's not owned by Amazon. I love when things aren't owned by Amazon. It happens less often than you would think. Um,
We love not Amazon.
I say on twitch.tv, but yes, and then here's the link for the science fiction and fantasy book club as well, in case you'd like to join for that one. It's kind of fun. It shows you how far through people are reading the book if they track their reading process, and then you get the leaderboard of the ratings. And I think that's fun. The ratings for
People
the
should
science fiction
track
and
it.
fantasy one is currently monopolized by me being grumpy at Iron Widow, but we continue. um, this is my subtle way of reminding Kai to
Follow
add
that.
their review on Storygraph. Um,
No,
but yes,
you call. Yes, I should.
I'm
I
doing
should
call
do
outs
it.
live on stream. I'm evil. I'm mad with power. But yeah, Storygraph's cool. I quite like it as a tool, and I'm nosy. I like to see what people are reading. So yeah. Uh,
I promise I'll put mine on and keep it up after I redo my TBR. Okay? Deal?
that might take years.
Hey, you're the one that told me I should redo my TBR, so
That's because you have it across 7 different things with overlapping
okay,
books.
leave me alone.
Like
Leave me
no
alone. Leave me
wonder,
alone.
no wonder
Leave
it's
me
a
alone.
hassle for you
Leave
to
me alone.
find books to suggest for book club. You've got them. Some of them are stored under rocks. Some of them are stored on top of mountains. You've got to go.
Leave me alone.
You've got to cross valleys, climb cliffs, pass seas to find
Leave
what
me,
books you want to read.
leave me alone. Leave me alone. I shall not be called out like this.
This is what happens when I get caffeine. I get evil. Hi, Prince. But yeah,
Friend, save me. Save me.
if you'd like to join the Storygraph, it's cool and fun. I just like being nosy. Um,
Yeah, join our story graph.
it's
It's
also
fun.
it's fun because the more people who join, the higher the likelihood we can do like a yearly wrap up where we look at the books we've read that year and look at the rankings of them and talk about which ones people enjoyed and in retrospect if you would still rank
Okay,
them in
I'll
that
join
order.
mine.
Isn't that cool? Then you're very energetic today. I had so much caffeine. I've had like a fifth of a Monster Energy, and I'm a mouse. I'm not built for that. I'm moving.
Kenya
Um,
has been caffeinated.
uh, it's book caffeine. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Double dosage books and caffeine. I'm going crazy. I should probably not have any more Monster for a while. I'm gonna move that away. But yes,
Kenya's very caffeinated.
a little bit. Um,
What's that?
My taste in
Oh,
reading is very
oh.
different from usual. Oh yeah, we're talking about the book club books. We're talking about the books we pick out for book club for Storygraph. I think you arrived halfway through me explaining something. I'm sorry. Um,
Oh, I
but
think you
yes.
are halfway through that.
In terms of how much do I like the book, I don't know. It's weird because if it was the historical bits, I'd absolutely recommend it to people. I think it did a great
If
thing.
it was just the history bits.
If they did just the history bits, it'd be great, but it isn't. There's so much really, really basic establishing information on AI that just feels devoid from the current level of understanding, and also has so much repetition without much complexity, in such a way that it doesn't feel like it's building towards a higher understanding that would justify the repetition. And it's also by no means an encompassing issue, although it's difficult to in like pop informative books. The absence of discussion of hallucinations within data or the like black box nature of understanding AI decision making, it feels like it's missing such key features that I can't help be a bit grumpy with it.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
it does. It feels. Yeah. I don't know. If it was just.
If it's just the history bits, I'd absolutely recommend it to people. Um,
Yeah. Honestly, I might rate it a 4 for just the history bits. Especially if we got more.
Yeah,
If
like
with all that
if
space we
if it
got
was just the
more
history
history.
bits, even with the because all of the like hook and the like weird clickbait esque writing styles where it forgets the investment agreement of books, they were all in the AI bits. All of the best writing was in the history segments, which makes sense because that's Harari's main domain. Um, and
Yeah.
so yeah, if it was just the history bits, it could be
That's
like a
true.
4.5 star book to me. But because it still does
Yeah.
some insane things, brackets Iraq framing within the book. Um, but but yeah, I don't know. Would I read a sequel
It
or
does
another
do
book
that.
by the author? Maybe. I'm honestly less likely to read his future works now, which is kind of a shame.
Yeah,
Um,
that's my thing. I've read all of his previous stuff, but this makes me want to not read his future stuff because the trend seems to be going down. So I'm like,
yeah, like if the
maybe
topic of
not.
Sapiens interests you, I think it's a good book on that. I would recommend it. Um, I don't think this is an improvement on any of his previous works, instead shows a decrease in ability to communicate topics clearly. Like, it's so strange. I I'm so used to the pattern of someone's work improving over time that I'm kind of flummoxed by this. But
Same.
I would recommend I would read *Sapiens* if I hadn't already, but I don't know if I'll read future works by this author. Based on the merit of it. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I don't feel like I would. Now that I'm thinking of.
But yeah, in terms of like the last little bit of who would I recommend it to, and then we kind of covered
Yes.
that there with who would I recommend it to. My only suggestion would maybe be, and I mean this in like the nicest way, but like to boomers, maybe. Like,
Yeah, I could see that.
I feel like if you are familiar with how social media has changed over the last 2 decades and you have followed that change to any extent, a lot of the meat and potatoes of the technology in this book is about that rather than AI, and the bit on AI is very brief and kind of doesn't go beyond present assumed cultural understanding. And so the intended audience for this would be someone who hasn't experienced and been embedded in that cultural change of social media, which to me is boomers, which I mean, it makes sense as like an
Yeah.
airport book. They're the only ones going on holidays nowadays. So, like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I actually like that. Yeah, that's
In the same way
yeah.
that people bought Sapiens for their dad for Christmas, so you could buy this again for them. Like, I don't know. It, yeah,
Yeah, I
that's my
kind of
only
I
recommendation
like that
category.
idea.
um, mhm. In terms
I was
of
gonna have none until that. Yeah.
the twisty boomer, in terms of books that would recommend if you enjoyed this or think the topic is interesting, um, boomers want to read too, yeah. One of the books I'd recommend is actually one of the ones that I nominated this month, which is I didn't make a note of it because I have it in my study because it's on my physical TBR, which is The Bookatoir by Andrew Pettigrew, which kind of
Hmm.
it takes a slightly different view rather of talking about information networks, talk strictly about the written word and how it was destroyed and distributed in an attempt to control public opinion and limit the spread of knowledge or promote the spread of incorrect knowledge. And when that was done, it's a more recent history. It's a little bit narrower than Nexus, but it has. I've not read it yet, but I picked it up from um, an independent bookshop that I really like, and it was one of the ones that was on the like little staff recommendation table. Um, but it's quite good in terms of being densely integrated in the history of things rather than like the broad theory, which wasn't engaged enough to feel valuable on its own to me. And so, although on a narrower topic with being books rather than information as a whole, I think that might be a good example. Um, yeah, that
Yeah.
was the only
Yeah, I like that.
example I have, and it's nominated. I will say I normally don't kind of come to this for books, but if you're going to pick up the Book at War by Andrew Pettigrew, it might be worth trying to pick up either a physical version or a version that has a slightly more sophisticated digital reading because it has a lot of like photos and prints in it in terms of portraits or maps, and it talks a little bit about propaganda, so it has images of propaganda posters printed in colour in page in the book, which is cool and exciting. And so if you're getting a digital copy, check them out. And it might be slightly difficult to listen to as an audiobook, although I know some audiobook delivery systems do allow books to have attached images, but it
Yeah.
never works as smoothly. So if you're picking it up digitally, make sure to find one that allows for the embedding of images digitally within the book, because some e-readers don't. But yeah,
Yeah,
that was my
thanks for that.
recommendation.
If that did get chosen, I was gonna do a digital version, but if that is the case, I might actually err on not digital.
I well, you can. There are digital versions, I believe, out there that have the images rendered within them. But I believe some of the older Kobos, for example, don't allow for like inline or in-page images, and so they're there as like a packet at the end of the book because it's a limitation of the older technology. And so if people are using e-readers, it can limit them, and most of the time it's not relevant. But I don't know. I think it's cool that the book has the images in over there. But yeah, is there any books you would recommend to people who found this book interesting or wanted to read more about the topics connecting to it?
I don't really because I don't know. Well, so you could do the book club if you just want to learn more and kind of that to a degree. You could read Why Machines Learn that we did for book club. That might be an okay idea for an AI specific view.
Yeah,
Um,
we've got a whole book club about that. If you'd like to see the video about it, it's on my YouTube archive channel, so you can watch the review as well. I'm doing such a good job
Yeah,
at promoting things today. Look at me go.
you really are. Maybe Caffeine Denia is promo Denia. Um,
Oh,
I don't have many other ones than that though. Mostly because like I don't know. This was this was a very interesting book in that it discussed some things but some things not that I would have thought it would. So like yeah, I don't know. I will say if you enjoyed this and you haven't read Sapiens, do go read Sapiens.
yeah,
That I do think because like if you enjoyed this, you will love Sapiens because Sapiens is this but incredible. It's so much better. So much better.
yeah.
Um, but for recommendations like this, I don't have many. I kind of want some.
The book at war. It's nominated for book club.
Hopefully it wins.
Ah, it's been so long since a book that's on my physical TBR has won for book club, and so it just keeps getting longer. At least that's my excuse. It's bad. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Should I count Jonathan Strange and Mr. Novel as 2?
Yes, yes, you should.
On that principle, should I also count Children of Strife as 2? And
Yes,
wait, no,
and you
because
should
then I
also count.
The Way of Kings is 2
No,
and David Copperfield is 2. Never mind, they're counting as 1. 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. It's reached 30! My bookshelf's
okay, it's
full!
gotta be more because
No,
I will say you should. Yes, because you should also count. Wait, do you have it?
The
I'm
Way
pretty
of
sure you have
Kings
it
is already
physical.
on there.
When you No, when you reread Harrow the Ninth, because you want to reread it before you read
I'm
Nona the Ninth.
currently.
You don't want to read Nona the Ninth.
You
Yeah,
haven't
but
you
your
haven't been updated on
eventual
my
reread.
insanity. I'm actively reading Harrow the Ninth at the moment.
No, no, I know, but your inevitable reread has to be on the list because you're gonna want to reread it before you read Nona the Ninth, and you only want to read Nona the Ninth when we get information on the next one.
No, no,
So
no, no.
you're
I've talked
eventually
myself
gonna
out
read
to
during
this.
that
I've
one.
talked myself out to this. I'm after this reread of Harrow the Ninth. I'm going to reread Nona. I'm going to read Nona the Ninth for the first time. I heard Ianthe got even worse, and I'm excited for it.
Okay, good.
This is how I
Okay,
was finally
we finally
convinced.
got there. We
I
finally got there.
I was talking to my friend Zada, and I was just like, yeah. I haven't read Nona. I should do, but I feel like I don't fully understand Harrow the Ninth, and so I'm just gonna reread again and see if I understand it a bit better. But I want to see if Ianthe becomes more of a problem, and then just a cacophony of noises occurred, and I became convinced. Um, so, uh,
God, fair, good,
Tasmin Mir,
good.
this is your reminder to please give us updates on Electo the Ninth. Pretty please. I love being confused, but I would also love a conclusion to this series. I
Yeah,
um
yeah, I went to a
yeah.
conclusion.
But yes, do we have any other more discussions? Because we started talking about um questionable space lesbians again, which is the second sign of us being distracted. Um
I think that's a good sign of being distracted.
Okay, so I think that wraps up our discussion on Nexus of I yeah. Let's talk about nominations for next month's book. um okay. So, how nominations work? We do a little democracy round here. Because of the limitations of Twitch's voting system, we do the voting in two parts, but we go through and we describe each of the books. We normally read the little blurb, we talk about any content warnings. It can be a little bit difficult to source content warnings for nonfiction books if we haven't read them, because the um, audience demographic are just less likely to tag them, and so it's more difficult to source online. But we'll go through that, and then we will do two polls. You can vote in both. Please do. And then the winner of each of the polls will be brought through to the finale. We do this in two because Twitch doesn't let you have more than 6 things in a poll, not because we like to take a long time doing things. I hope you
which is
understand.
just means.
Which is mean to me personally. Um, but yes, the first up for the nominations is the book I've just been talking about, The Book at War by Andrew Pettigrew. This is a book I picked up last month actually, and I picked it up when I went into brick and mortar bookshop, and I'm just going to read through the blurb. Um, since the advent of modern warfare, literature has all too often been found on the front lines, and in the Book of War, acclaimed historian Andrew Pettigrew traces the surprising ways the written culture has shaped and been shaped by conflicts of the modern age, from maps and guidebooks that helped plan the invasion of Normandy to the scientific papers that laid the foundations for the nuclear age and the blitz of libraries of the London Underground. This is the definitive story of how books, writers, readers have gone to war, meticulously researched and filed with fascinating details. The Book at War reveals how literature can be both a lethal weapon and a persuasive argument for peace. Which to me
Hmm.
sounds kind of like the book version of the interesting parts of Nexus. Which there's more information network than books, but it seems to be more focused on the historical context, and so I thought it might be a good one to talk about following this book club in particular. Um, in terms of content warnings, because it is a historical book and it mentions Normandy there, for example, there is discussion of death, violence, and war. I haven't read this book myself, but given some of the context surrounding it, I would expect there's discussion of. It seems like a large part of it revolves around World War II, and so um, I, I the general themes and contents that could come up there. So like Nazism, discrimination, anti-Semitism, and the atrocities that went on in that period. They are going to be passive content to the book, as is the case with books when we don't have super solid tags on them. Either myself or Kai will speed read, so we can give a updated version on the content warnings. Um, but yeah, it's one that I stumbled across and also just seemed kind of like the most interesting parts of Nexus as a full book, but specifically around books rather than information as a whole. Um, yeah.
It seems interesting. I kind of. It seems like all I wanted from Nexus, and we'll be real.
Mhm. The general reviews I've seen from talking about it is that it has really deep level of research, but can be a smidgen repetitive, which I think is kind of understandable from this style of book. But yeah, um,
Yeah.
mhm.
Okay. Any more notes on that one? It seems I kind of want to read it. I actually
uh,
put it on my TBR.
I don't think so. But yeah, it's something that I want to read. I think the discussion of the power and the usage of literature is very important, especially when we're in an age where literature can change with its only being preserved in a digital format without us being able to confirm or track it. And so I think things like this are important because the possibility of the changes that happens to books depicted in this text is all the more likely nowadays. Both from the kind of like non-malicious version that people have been talking about with seeing adverts for TikTok and the Gossip Girl books that came out in the 2000s, to more malicious versions with potentially retconning of history from there only being digital versions of things. But yeah, it's just a topic that I think is interesting. In terms of length, it's 480 pages, so a smidgen beefy for a historical text. But it's a book club. We like books about
Oh,
books.
it's
Um,
a book club.
yeah,
We read in book club.
we be book club. I'm just always scared whenever I talk about long books because
Yeah.
I feel like I drove Kai a little bit insane when I suggested and when Priory got nominated. Have you finished Priory yet?
Yeah, I finished Priory.
Oh, okay, neat.
I did finish it. Also,
Um,
Priory was fine. 700 pages is fine. It was just Priory's so slow. Priory's so slow. And it drags in the middle.
I think genuinely Fiery's pacing would have been fine if it stayed slow, but the fact that it accelerated crazily in the last 150 pages made it feel worse. But yeah. Actually, never mind. You didn't reach the last 150 pages first time you read it, so maybe it was quite slow.
I never got there. I just
Yeah.
got close to it, and then Brave said no.
That's should we meander over to the next book which has been nominated, which is Super Nintendo by
Doss.
Keza MacDonald? Do you want to yap a little bit about
Yeah.
this one?
Okay, so this just seemed fun and interesting. This is about Nintendo, the video game company, and how it happened. Like how this monolith of gaming like rose up and became a thing from like how in 1889 Nintendo got established as a trading card company and became like a video game company randomly and then just blew up for that and became like a massive thing all over the world. Um and this is about this is a Kaz McDonald is a video game journalist, a very well-known video game journalist. And what she does with this is she tracks like Nintendo through its experimental years and how they like worked through a bunch of stuff, like the driving forces behind like what creative decisions they made, like a bunch of the people attached to a lot of those decisions and things. Including like she interviews like so many people. Like I know Shigeru Miyamoto is in it, who created Mario,
Ooh,
for
yeah.
example. She gets an interview with him. She also talks to a bunch of the people at Nintendo HQ, and she is one of the very few Western journalists that ever actually get to go to Nintendo HQ. Um, but yeah, this is just a talk about like how this company rose to what it is today, and like kind of the whirlwind that they rode to get here.
Yeah.
No, it's not Mario Isekai, sadly. I just thought it just sounded interesting. It's like video game business type vibe.
That does sound interesting. I know a little bit about the history of factions of Nintendo. Like I know quite a bit about the history of Animal Crossing and Dragon Quest, but I don't know much about it as a business as a whole. So that is interesting. Um,
Hmm,
is there any content
I thought so
warnings?
too.
I
No,
yeah.
this from from what I saw, this is a very light-hearted book that has like no real content warnings or like sensitive topics or anything it gets into.
Mhm. Okay, moving on to the next book, and a change from that, we have Orlando by Virginia Woolf. Um, this is the case of uh, this is lit fiction and non-fiction, and this is actually an example of literary fiction that I wanted to reread. I first read Orlando when I was a small mouse and didn't think I engaged with it fully, and so I thought we don't nominate or get to discuss literary fiction super often, so this might be a good example. Virginia Woolf is kind of a how would I say this? Like an author at the forefront of not modern anymore, because it's in 1928, but was a pivotal figure in recent literary fiction. I think there's a fair way
Yeah,
to describe her. But yeah, um, the thrill of I'm going to read the description because it's a popular book. The description's a bit mush, but I hope everyone understands. I don't have a better way to summarize it. Um, the thrill of reading Virginia
yeah,
Woolf's Orlando is the feeling of looking into a whirlpool just as something utterly extraordinary materializes for the first time. On an exhilarating hallucination of surreal and beautiful images that remain in memory long after you put the book down. Orlando has it all: life, death, immortality, homoerotic desire, lesbianism, and the evanescence of time, love, fear, solitude, death, and the time travel. The subjects float by like parasols in the rain. Orlando can be found on countless lists of the finest novels of the 20th century, and is one of Virginia Woolf's major achievements. It is considered one of her greatest works after Mrs. Dalloway and To the Lighthouse. Adeline Virginia Woolf was an English author, essayist, and publisher, and writer of short stories, regarded as one of the foremost modern literary figures of the 20th century. During the interwar period, Woolf was a significant figure in the London Literary Society and member of the Bloomsbury Group. Her famous works include the novels Mrs. Dalloway to the Lighthouse, Orlando, and the book-length essay A Room of One's Own. So yes, Virginia Woolf is quite a key literary figure, and this is it's also litfic as well as nonfic, and we don't get a huge amount of recommendations, and this is one that I actually have on my physical TBR and want to revisit. The reason why I introduced it like that is because moving on to the content warnings, the content warnings are for racism, racial slurs, sexism, misogyny, classism, and then, as is often the case with a lot of Woolf's work, war, xenophobia. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some tags that show up in small numbers. So there's a few people who've tagged this for transphobia and cultural appropriation. It's been a long time since I read this book. It's one of those cases where you have a book that's been tagged 100 times for one thing and 5 times for another. So the the how central that thing is may vary, but just worth mentioning since it's been a while. It's been a decade solidly since I've read this book. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not very good at recommending literary fiction because I don't read a huge amount of it, and most of the literary fiction I read
Either.
is magical realism, which I normally feel like I should nominate in our sci-fi and fantasy book club. Um, but because this is Wolf, even though
Same.
it's magical realism, it felt like it fits solidly enough in literary fiction. And so,
Yeah.
honestly, I've really enjoyed discussing the literary fiction we've done in the past, and so I wanted to nominate something like this. Um, yeah, I don't
Oh
know
yeah.
if you've got
No, that
any
seems cool.
shenanigans. Yeah.
I lo- no, no, this is a good idea. I've read some Virginia Woolf. Um, I think I've read this one. I don't remember.
I thought this might be a good one because it's one of her more recognizable works, but it's not the central one. And so it kind of has a nice
Yeah.
middle ground of being acclaimed and respected without it being likely that everyone's read it, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like it. I really like it. It's a great recommendation. Next,
Yep. So,
we
oops. Oh,
have next we have Blind Spots by Marty McCary. The full title is Blind Spots When Medicine Gets It Wrong and What It Means for Our Health. Um, but that's a bit long for any title, so we don't do that one. Um, so what this is it's a medical expert who is it's talking about like medical group thinking, right? When you ignore specific, like if you ignore in quotation mark outliers, how that harms health and harms public safety and health. So, for example, they talk about in how more Americans have peanut allergies today than at any other point in history. Why? Because in 2000, the American Academy for Pediatrics issued a strict recommendation that parents avoid giving their children peanut products until they're 3 years old. What happens is your body then doesn't produce the enzymes needed to break down peanuts, which then causes them to develop allergies to it. Um, which this is all that this talks about is stuff like that. Is how group thinking and the like generalization of medicine harms so many human beings, and how oftentimes something we trust so heavily is like very harmful to society. Another one, for example, is how opioids was sold as not addictive. And then we got the opioid crisis, which is yeah. So that's that. It's talking about when like the recommendation of medicine is often harmful to society. Um, and of a very big thing in our society because just in the American healthcare system, it's a $4.5 trillion ecosystem, um, which is an exorbitant amount of money, and how much harm there is in that system. Um, for trigger warnings, just to get those out of the way before we talk a little bit more about it, it does mention alcoholism, bullying, and cancer as like things that I can see as like general notes. And then it talks about death, drug use and drug abuse, mental illness a little bit. Most of this is minor stuff. It's nothing
I don't.
out there for like
I haven't read this
yeah.
book, but I would imagine that it's going to talk a little bit about institutionalized racism if it's talking about medical blind spots.
It does. It also talks about classism a little bit. In that like care for different classes are often very different. Um and then it obviously mentions like medical trauma and stuff like that, um and some terminal illness stuff. Most of your like classic medical talk stuff that you will get when you talk about medicine. But yeah, this just seems like an interesting read on like how medicine is. It's a science, but it's a very ongoing science that is constantly evolving, and often selling it as like a solved field does a lot more harm than good,
Hmm.
if
Yeah.
you understand what I mean.
Absolutely.
It just seemed very interesting. I was very curious about it.
Yeah, it does sound interesting. I think this is a book that I have on my TBR because I've had it recommended to me, but I've not picked up. So, um,
Oh, awesome.
in terms of books that's been on my TBR for a while, this is on one which is highest up there, which is Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall. The full title of it is Notes from the Woman That the Movement Forgot. So this is a memoir essay intertwine that discusses the experience of kind of the absence of intersectionality of parts of modern feminism and discusses um, how the idea of feminism moving on when the standards which it moves on from haven't been achieved for all and the disconnect that can cause. So I'm going to jump into reading the blurb. If you're in online book spaces, you've potentially encountered this book. I feel like it's quite commonly recommended. That might just be my my algorithm and feed. But today's feminist movement has a glaring blind spot, and paradoxically, it's women. We rarely talk about the meeting basic needs as a feminist issue, argues Nikki Kendall, but food insecurity, access to quality education, safe neighbourhoods, a living wage, and medical care are all feminist issues. All too often, however, the main focus is not on basic survival for many, but on increasing privilege for the few. The feminists that refuse to point these issues has only exacerbated the age-old problem of both internecine discord and the women who rebuff it carrying the title. Moreover, prominent white feminists broadly suffer from their own myopia with regard to how things like race, class, and sexual orientation and ability intersect with gender. How can we stand in solidarity as a movement? Kendall asks, when there is a distinct likelihood that some women are oppressing others. And in the searching lesson of essays, Mickey Kendall takes aim at the legitimacy of the modern feminist movement, arguing that it has chronically failed to address the needs of all but a few women, drawing on her own experiences with hunger, violence, and hypersexualization, along with the incisive commentary on politics, pop culture, and the stigma of mental health and more. Hood Feminism delivers an irrefutable indictment of movements in flux, and it's a debut author. Um, yeah, and so
Oh,
that's the
awesome.
little introduction blurb. It then goes on to talks about awards, which is why I peed it off because I find those bits tend not to be the most illuminating when figuring out if you're going to read a book. As you may be able to tell by the introduction and description, this covers a lot of pretty serious topics. It discovers in like key detail racism, sexism, misogyny, domestic abuse, gun violence, police brutality, miscarriage, and then there's also mentions of abortion, eating disorder, transphobia, sexism, ableism. I think those are the main ones. There's you can imagine, given the topic, there's a lot of discussion of oppression and how intersectionality and overlapping, being part of overlapping groups that suffer oppression from systems can contribute to an escalation of the problems. And so there's quite a lot of heavy topics covered. But this is a book that I've wanted to read for a long time, and I see really good reviews of. I know it's like a strange thing to rate it by, but it's got 4.24 stars out of 28,000 reviews on Storygraph, which that's a high ranking. Like seeing a book over 4.25 stars isn't super common. But yeah, this is an essay collection I've been wanting to get to for quite a while. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds sick. I like it. Especially from a debut author. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I hadn't
Mickey
actually realized it
Kendall.
was a debut until I read that part of the description. So, um, but yeah, they've just gone on to contribute to a lot of other uh, works relating to intersectional feminism, essentially, and broader topics, but it's a key focus of writing, I believe. Um, so yeah, it sounds interesting. It's been a while since we've read an essay collection, so
It has been. Maybe too long.
maybe.
Next one. I'm kind of curious about this one because it's something that I have heard about. So this is Unread by Oliver James, which is about so the full title is Unread, a memoir of learning and loving to read on TikTok. Basically, it's the little blurb says, as a result of childhood learning disabilities and educational regrets, Oliver James graduated from high school and became one of over 8 million functionally illiterate Americans. However, at age 34, with big dreams and few tools to actualize them, he dedicated himself to learning the key skill that has evaded him his entire life. Oliver became a TikTok/book talk sensation for the way he's candidly documented his decision to learn to read as an adult and his struggles and triumphs along the way. Here he tells the full story behind his journey for the first time through 21 key books that shaped and informed his experience. His story reveals the ways in which reading can teach each of us how to be better, more empathetic people. In just 35 days, Oliver went from barely being able to read a restaurant menu to closing in on his goal of finishing 100 books in a year. Um, it is a moving reminder to all of us that words and stories have power, and that no matter our past, it is never too late to grow. Um, it seemed really interesting. Um, and we often like to talk about like books and the power of books and what content can mean. And this is kind of exactly that in how, and he talks about specifically 21 books that shaped his journey and his falling in love with reading, which
Mhm.
is an interesting, I think it might be a very interesting look into those books. Um, yeah, it
That
seems
sounds
very,
really
very interesting.
interesting. It wasn't a book that I was aware of, but I want to read that now. I the
Yeah.
the literacy crisis is very real and tangible, but it's often kind of discussed as a insurmountable thing. So to see an example where it's been not just combated but fallen in love with reading, I think is really great. That sounds really interesting. Um, I'm trying to search
Yeah,
it
so
up
I
to add it to my TBR.
I'm kind of I'm really kind of interested in it. There was one more thing. Oh, content warnings. So this one is very hard to find content warnings of because there's like one review of this on Storygraph.
Mhm.
Um and from that one review on Storygraph there is, let's get the whole list. So for graphic ones, there's talk about addiction, specifically alcohol addiction, uh cursing, a little bit of talk about infidelity. I don't know how much of it is like there's some talk about like pregnancy, some mental illness, panic disorders. There's talk about like a learning disability. Um, there's talk about like some talk about like how forced institutionalization is and stuff like that. I don't know how much of it is like, it's hard to say. This one will definitely be one I speed read like instantly if this does get chosen. Um it's at least not that long. It's only 244 pages as well, but it seemed really interesting to me.
Mhm. It does sound really interesting. It's also, how do I phrase this? It's not a perspective we hear about in writing because we often see
No,
kind of intellectuals who've had the full benefit of the education system remarking on the experience that people like Oliver James have with being failed by the education system. And so it's really
yeah,
interesting to have a text which is from that perspective. Um, Even if this doesn't get picked for book club, I definitely want to read this. It sounds really interesting.
yeah. I want. It's one of those for me too, where I really really want to read this.
Mhm.
I think it's super interesting. But yeah, I just thought it would be a fun one.
Yeah.
Talking about the power of books on the book club.
Mhm, mhm. Um, okay, moving on to the last one is Bird by Bird by Annie Lamott. And so this is a little bit different from the others, but it's going back to the notion of a kind of memoir and reflection on life and writing by an author and poet. So I'm going to jump into the blurb. It's another slightly abstract blurb that happens when I pick books that are more literary, but we do what we can with the blurbs that just say keywords. This is slightly more concrete than that. But 30 years ago, my brother, who was 10 years old at the time, was trying to get a report on birds written that he'd had 3 months to write. It was due the next day. We were out at our family cabin in Billings, and he was at the kitchen table, close to tears, surrounded by a binder of paper and pencils and unopened books on birds, immobilized by the hugeness of the task ahead. Then my father sat down beside him, put an arm around my brother's shoulders, and said, "Bird by bird, buddy, just take it bird by bird." With this basic introduction always in mind, Anna Lamont returns to us with a new gift, a step-by-step guide on how to write and how to manage a writer's life, from getting started with short assignments, through shitty first drafts, character, plot, dialogue, all the way to false starts. And how do you know when you're done? Mom encourages and instructs and inspires. She discusses writer's block, writing groups, publication, and facing honesty. She also dives in is one of the funniest people alive. If you have ever wondered what it takes to be a writer, the madness that ensues, and what it means to be a writer, what the contents of your schedule of your school lunches said about what your parents really like, this book is for you. From faith and love to grace and pain, jealousy, fear, Lamont insists you keep your eyes open and shows you how to survive. And as always, from life to the artist, she turns to the art of life. Well, I got muddled in my words at the end, but yeah, it's quite interesting. The one caveat I had with nominating this is it's a little bit more focused on the life of a writer than just like a general memoir. But I still thought it was quite interesting.
Well, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah, because we often discuss the kind of, how do I phrase this? We often break down books a lot, and so I thought this look at how they're written and some of the, especially the emotional experience of that process, might add some
Hmm.
information. Um, But yeah, it's a book which, this is gonna sound really silly and nosy, but I love when authors do tours of their bookshelves, and I'm always really nosy about the like on writing books that I see on people's shelves. And for a lot of them, I recognize the on writing cases and the authors there, but I didn't recognize Annie Lamont, and I saw this book cropping up quite a few times, and so I thought it might be quite interesting. And so I
Oh,
haven't
interesting.
read much of her work, but I I stole this recommendation on from seeing it in the background of bookshelves of people. So yeah, I
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Also, shout outs
That's
to
interesting.
authors whenever you're doing like a digital call and you're appearing for like authors interviewing authors, please do it in front of your bookshelves. I love being nosy.
Yes.
But yeah, so
I like to see what you read.
mhm, mhm. Um, I'm gonna talk a little bit about the content warnings because they're awesome on here. Despite you would maybe think of it as quite a light book, there's some quite notable ones
Yeah.
added. So it
Okay.
discusses ableism, child death, alcoholism, cancer, death per parent, addiction, body shaming, and minor mentions of child death and terminal illness, alcohol, and suicidal thoughts. So there are
Hmm.
some quite
Okay.
heavy topics. It is a memoir, so it is done in a way where it
Yeah.
overlaps with the author's life, I believe. Um, but yeah, I just
Often
thought
in
this.
service of it.
Mhm. Um, we tend to, between myself and Kai, we tend to nominate at least one book which is roughly about the like study and life of writing and the experience of working on it. And so I thought this might be an interesting one. Because we normally just kind of
Yeah.
not to
This one does seem very interesting.
pigeon box ourselves, but we often pick an acclaimed, especially older science fiction and fantasy writer, and then pick their version of on writing. And so I thought this was a nice departure from that structure, with, from my understanding, Lamar primarily being a activist and poet, almost equal to, if not in front of her writing. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually now that you pointed out, yeah, we do.
I mean, there are natural genres, so it kind of makes sense. There's the authors we'd go to first. That
Yeah.
being said, the only one we've actually picked out, I think, was Murakami, which doesn't quite fall into that trap. Although I suppose there's an amount of
True.
magical realism in some of his works. Um, but but yeah, I thought this
Cool.
is
This one seems
quite an
very interesting.
interesting one. Yeah, it's one I want to read at some point that I thought might be, how do I phrase this? It might benefit discussion. There would be space for us to yap, I think, about this one. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to
Yeah, I
nominate her.
agree.
Okay, I should have planned ahead and made the poll, but I did not. Would you like to talk a little bit
Cool.
whilst I set up democracy? Um,
Yes. What do we talk about?
well, I was hoping to
Uh
outsource that to you. Do you want to talk about
hmm,
what you've been reading recently? Just as
rebrand.
in
Oh,
rebrand. Rebrand is
reading.
exciting too.
Yeah, we can talk about rebrand. I'm no longer gonna be hologram. I don't know what I'm gonna be though. So if you have ideas, give me ideas.
I've got so many ideas,
Uh
though. This is the issue.
ooh, 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 I like that. I like the sound of that. That sounds like a great idea time.
Did I
You
ever
should give me ideas.
did did I ever talk about my secondary idea that I didn't end up using?
No,
Okay.
I didn't.
I'm going to start the first poll. So this is make sure to vote. We love democracy. In this first poll is going to be The Book Étoile by Andrew Pettigrew, Super Nintendo by Keza MacDonald, and Orlando by Virginia Woolf. And once this ends, we'll have the second vote, which has Blind Spots by Marty McKay, Hood Feminism by Mickey Kendall, Unread by Oliver James, and Bird by Annie Lamar. And then we'll take the ones with the most votes from those two categories and run it off in a final. But yeah, we've got first poll starting now. Please make sure to vote. Um, we kept having draws last time and it was stressful.
Democracy. Democracy. Go do democracy.
Democracy. Um, but yeah, my
Yeah, what is gonna be your backup?
my backup choice
Or,
was, I really like, so it was gonna be like a magical girl style, but instead of being magical girl superhero, it was gonna be like in a world where magical girls just exist and each one has a niche, and if you have the like magical girl trait, then you join this team of like elite people all with some kind of level of specialization. But it was going to just be like a neat character that's magical girl ability is actually just being a really good and proficient office worker. And so instead of joining the like magical girl society where they save the planet and do cool things, they've just managed to hold down an office job whilst being a disaster who plays Civ for 100 hours a week. And that was going to be the like the theme.
that
But
awesome.
That was the one that came second. There was a few others. I think I had about 20 listed out because I'm silly like that. But yeah, that was
That's
the
an
backup
awesome
choice.
idea.
I just thought it was kind of fun because it was like people talk about how superheroes always go off to save the world, and I was just like, what if the superpower was like kind of benign? And they do that a little bit with Ant-Man, but then he ends up being a superhero anyway. And so I thought
Yeah.
like a spin on it might be fun. Um,
What's winning in our first part, by the way?
it is currently a tie between the Book of War and Orlando. Hi Azia,
Okay.
how are you doing?
I still need to vote because I don't get to vote in that
If your
poll.
main skill is office work, you won't help in the battleground. I'm here with the background. I'm not familiar with the battleground. Westmore seems to know something I don't. Made
Honestly,
for
I kind of want to vote for Orlando. Have you voted?
I have. I'm a little bit biased. I voted for Orlando. I think the Book of War is a great recommendation from Nexus, but I feel like it might be a bit too similar to read back to back. Was
That's my
my
thoughts.
yeah. Um,
They're exactly the same place.
made 5 million stock bills off a person again. I'm gonna be so honest. I have not opened um Enfield in about 2 weeks. Whenever there's a new banner, I open to
Oh,
get the 5 free pulls. But yeah,
I cannot believe it.
scandalous. When was the last time you opened Enfield? You never started playing.
No, I did. 2 weeks.
Oh,
Two
and
weeks after it came out.
Orlando has won for the first part of the poll. Do you have the second poll ready to rumble?
No. Yes, I do. Second part of the poll. Boom. Surprise.
What was that
You'll never
misinformation?
catch me
What was
lacking.
that? Okay,
You'll never catch me lacking.
and in the second part of our poll, we have blind feminism. We have blind spots by Marty McKay. I am quite dyslexic. Good feminism by Mikhail Kendall. Unread by Oliver James. And Bird by Annie Lamont. The winner, whichever have either the winning or the joint winning, will be brought through into the finale to run off against Orlando by Virginia Woolf. So take part in democracy. Woo! I
Go
don't.
democracy now.
I don't know what to vote for.
Maybe if I intimidate people, they'll go doing democracy. Go.
Maybe.
Go do democracy now. Now.
Honestly, I'm inclined to vote for unread, I think. Yeah.
Hmm. Bird by bird.
Oh, we can only have a tie. We have a three-way tie. I would like to continue to do democracy. But not like this.
Oh,
I'm gonna start making the finale poll. And I'm gonna hope that
it's a very interesting situation.
someone votes without making it a four-way poll. Please, pretty please. Um,
This is an interesting situation that we find ourselves in.
yeah. Please vote.
Oh,
Oh,
blind spots with
interesting.
2 votes out of nowhere. Let's go.
That's kind of crazy. We got a little bit of time left. Do we have any more votes coming in? Democracy noises. Ooh. Oh, Blind Spots is pulling ahead. Wow. This has been like a return from the wings, because there's previously the other three books tying for first. Bum, bum,
Ooh,
bum.
Unread got another. Nice.
Democracy noises are funny
Uh,
noises. Okay. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's not actually the end of the timer, but I was applying artificial pressure, you know. Um,
yeah.
Imagine a marketer on Isekai. My main skill is to make popular demon lord, so he becomes the next ruler. Wait, what?
Oh,
It's an
sounds
Isekai
interesting.
therapist with patience of all Isekai tropes. It's complete on Royal Road. Oh, interesting. I don't read a huge amount of isekai, I'm gonna be honest, but I feel like I got grumpy with isekai a few years ago because of the amount of it that gets like published and hyped, and then I just don't give it a fair shot anymore. But okay, so Blind Spots by Marty
Rude.
McKay came in first. So our finale is going to be between Orlando by Virginia Woolf and Blind Spots by Marty McKay, starting now. McRae, sorry, not McKay. I'm dyslexiaing in extremes.
Hmm. Interesting. Two very different books. Two
Two
very
very
different
different
books.
books. Yeah. I feel like I know which one I'm inclined to, but I always feel bad about saying my opinions early on because I feel like I skew the bit. But remember to take part in democracy. If the me asking nicely compelled you before, I'm asking nicely again. Woo, democracy. Um,
For democracy.
go democracy. Um,
We'll do it now. No.
I'm not sure if that counts as asking nicely. Um,
I'm not
Tang
asking
over
nicely. I'm the
Rossi.
one
I
that's
have
supposed
other
to
things to play,
intimidate.
so I need to log on to burn sanity. That's fair. I've not been even burning sanity. Um, but yeah. Um, ba ba ba
It's
ba.
good cop, bad cop then, yeah. I'm bad cop.
Okay. Which book do you think you're gonna vote for? Because they
I
are
don't know.
very different. I kind of know which one I'm gonna pick. Whoa!
Oh, that's a lot of votes for one. You see, bad cop worked. I was a bad cop
Yeah.
and then they went and voted.
It does look like Orlando's pulling quite strongly ahead. We still got 1 minute 30 on the clock for democracy. Ooh!
Orlando's pulling very ahead.
Uh, it makes me happy when I see so many people voting in polls. I'm just having a great time. I like people caring about what books we read. But yeah, it looks like Orlando's pulling ahead, which I'm honestly quite excited for. I've really
Hmm,
enjoyed talking about the literary fiction we read, and so I think this will be a good one. Like, it was really fun talking about the Book of Tea and
it was.
um bu- 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 the picture of Dorian Gray. Although, even though we got a bit distracted with Oscar Wilde's life more so than the book itself, but I think Orlando should be really interesting. But then also, Blind Spots is something which I'm aware of in broad strokes, but don't know many specifics of, and so I feel like it'd be very informative for me to read about it. But I feel like we've read quite a few informative nonfiction books recently,
We have.
and so it might be nice. I voted for Orlando. It's why I'm struggling to do like a balanced prompt for it. But it looks like the voting
Yeah,
lines
I
are good
can't
there.
help with that one. I can't help with that one. I voted for Orlando.
Okay, okay. I was just like, I feel like I should be doing a better job given the aforementioned democracy to advocate for both books. But I'm quite excited to be talking about literary fiction for the first time in a while. So um,
Yeah,
it looks like we're
it's
going
lit
to be
fiction
reading
one.
Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I realized that partway through the introduction of today's books, we've stopped saying how long the books were, which is my bad. But given that we've just
Oh,
decided it's 320 pages, which to me is like
that's chill.
that's like the average book length you'd expect.
Short.
Yeah. So
That's short.
for non-fiction, they tend to be on the short. For like this category, they tend to be on the not shorter side. It's less common you get like 500-page non-fiction. And I know this is lit fiction, but still.
Oh, oh. You're not wrong. Now I need non-fiction to step up. I need 600-page not like non-fiction.
Sometimes I want to nominate a book, but then I'm just like, gosh, this is 700 pages on like the history of plants. I don't know if I can convince the people to read this. And so sometimes I will say I do admittedly curb my non-fiction recommendations because it's just like I really want to read this book someday, but I don't know if I can convince everyone else to read it, and I also don't know if I want to read it within a month. Um, Democratic Kai is the
Fair.
right way. Kai for world president.
I agree. I shall be word president now.
Um, 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 no. Veto.
Well, no, no, you want to yes, because my first order as world president is that everybody should join book club and read books with us.
I mean, I don't think they should be ordered. I think they should get the opportunity to. No
No
mandatory
choice.
book club.
Book club. Mandatory.
So that's the takeaway from reading Nexus. It's the plan on how book club's going to be a mandatory global event from Kai's perspective. But I'm very excited to talk about Orlando by Virginia Woolf. Like I said when introducing it, it's nonfiction litfic, but we normally end up picking informative nonfiction or occasionally memoirs, and so I'm quite excited to read Orlando, and it was a book I was hoping to reread anyway.
Yeah.
So I already have a physical copy on my shelf, so I don't even have to get a copy from World of Books.
Of course, it's
So
part of the physical TBR. Of course it is. Of course it is.
this is all the grand plan to stop my TBR getting higher from having to pick a book that wasn't on it. So maybe by this time next month, I'll be down to how bold and arrogant do I want to be with this statement? I think I can get down to 28.
No, you could hit 26 at least.
No, I can't
25,
because
27.
because the Gilded Ones isn't on my physical TBR, and I'm reading that, and I don't have a physical copy of Nona, and I'm reading that this month, and I don't have a physical copy of Legendborn, and I'm reading that this month. So that's 4 of the next. I normally read 4 to 8 books a month, and so that's like half of them signed
Yeah,
off
but
for.
we're doing a buddy read. We're doing one buddy read of your physical TBR. So like that's at least one. And then
This
this
is
one,
true.
and then maybe like one more. Like
Maybe. I have one of Oscar Wilde's short poetry
I
collections on there, so I might just read that really quickly. I should post a
I
photo of my
predict
physical
the
TBR so
TBR.
people can roast me. Growing by at
Did you see
least
dust?
2? No, because I got new bookends, which I'm very excited about, but they do make it so that I've now run out of space on the singular shelf that my physical TBR takes up. And so if I get any more books, then I will have to start moving my plushes off the shelf below it to accommodate. So that's not allowed. uh, but yeah, let
Yeah,
us.
that usually only happens with my TBR. My TBR just keeps growing.
To be fair, my digital TBR is over 400 books now, which one of my
For,
goals.
oh,
It's a 435. One of my goals for
oh.
20 at the end of 2025 for this year was that I didn't want my physical my but I didn't want my TBR to grow by over 100 books. So I was like, if I add 100 books I want to read, any more than that, I need to read to like balance it out. So I need to read 35 books of my TBR in the remaining months and not add any, um, which is
I feel not happening.
unlikely. um, I don't know. I've been reading a lot. I'm sprinting.
Yeah,
I'm
but not adding is not happening.
yeah yeah yeah. I did such
So
a good
I
job
realize
reading
I'm the
last
problem.
month. So far this year I am 46% of the way through my reading goal for the year already. And I try not
Oh,
to like
nice.
quantify reading a bunch, but I kind of killed it in terms of reading. I was meaning to post my Storygraph stats, but I forget that I have to avoid internet for this end of March and start of April because I'm scared of people. Did I get the months the way
Oh, fair.
round? January, March, April. Yes, I did. So I like take a hibernation of the internet around April Fools. Um, but
Fair. Valid.
but yeah, so I read a lot this month. Last month I was a little bit of a machine. I read. Wait, let me get my stats. I'm proud of myself. Um, do, 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 do.
Also, 400. I realize I might be a problem.
I read 6 books, and that might not
Oh,
sound like a
nice.
lot, but they were big books. I read over 4,000 pages. the the shortest book I read last month was Confronting the Classics. Um, the average book was over 500 pages. I was reading big books last month. I also read most of Eldest by Christopher Poloni from the Inheritance Cycle, but didn't finish it. So there's a solid 600 pages in that, 500 pages in there that haven't been counted.
Damn. Yeah, you did well last month.
I did.
Nice.
Admittedly, I didn't stream very much, and so that contributed in part. But I'm
Fair.
I'm trying
True.
to do better.
Oh, well.
My insomnia's got bad again, so I feel like I'm not energetic enough to stream recently. But I'm trying my best. Maybe the answer is just
Insomnia?
caffeine.
Who? Insomnia who? I've not seen you get onto Slay the Spire 2 at 2 a.m.
No.
I would never see that.
No one's ever seen that. But yeah, we will be having our meeting day for our next book club, which is now going to be Orlando by Virginia Woolf on Sunday, the 3rd of
Yeah.
May. We're having to do it on a Sunday, not a Saturday, because I'm touching grass. Apologies, I'm going outside.
Mm,
I can't be
grass
helped.
touching.
I don't go outside very often. No, I'm going outside more. I'm doing a great job. Look at me go.
You are.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
You go
Woo!
to author events now
I
and get book
I'm
signed
going to one
and meet authors I wish I could meet.
I'm going to one literary talk or book signing a month. That's my goal. I'm going to the gym twice a week. I'm going outside. It does interfere with streaming, which is the downside, but I can do it at other times of the day. Yeah, I'm excitable. Um, Shaker there. She's all welcome library. I've well, if I'm gonna recommend books to people, I need to have read them. I know some people can just kind of gauge books and recommend them without reading them, but that's an ability I feel like I'll never develop. And so I'm in awe of the librarians that can do that, but I'm not equipped. Um,
I don't know if I'm equipped.
uh, but it's a good goal, but knowing you, it's not a very possible one. It's probably not. I thought about doing a stream which is reviewing and updating my TBR and maybe removing books
Okay,
from it,
unironically, would you
but
be down to do that? I would be down to join. I do want to redo
maybe
my TBR.
if you combine your TBR, we can do that as a reward where we go through our
Oh, so
TBRs.
after I go through all
Well,
800,
yeah.
after I go through all
How are
800
we
entries.
going to do that unless you have a consolidated version of your TBR? We're not doing it when you swap between 20 websites.
Get true. Fair. Fair.
Oh, hi,
But then
the
I need
whole
to
of
go through.
Britain. Sorry I'm late to the meeting. The traffic was atrocious. Understandable. The train probably broke down as well. I'm afraid we're towards the end of the meeting, but that's indicative of the motorways. I did a very good job in not saying the motorway which I get stuck on. There. Look at me go. Um,
No doxing, no doxing.
I have done a
Ooh.
remarkable job of never doxing myself. Shout out to me. Stares at some of my friends.
Especially when you look at some of our friends, like a
Yeah.
vampire.
No, well, we're not even calling anyone out because she's not a vampire anymore. So,
Exactly. Can't prove anything.
have you ever thought about writing your own book? I've thought about writing. I've never really thought about publishing, which I feel like is a strange caveat. Because I'd love to write a
Nah, it's valid.
story, but I feel like I would struggle through the process that I've heard described of the experience of having a book go through editing and mass market structuring. Um,
Yeah.
and so I don't know. I yeah. I've been doing some work this year practicing my ability to write essays and short stories, just because I think communication is important. And strange statement for someone who yaps on the internet as their hobby, but I'm not super confident in my communication skills, especially when it comes to serious topics. And so I wanted to practice writing essays or short stories that are allegories to improve and refine my ability to communicate, even if it's in a slightly artificial format. And so that's one of my big goals for this year, but I don't know if I would ever like write a book and query it to be published. I enjoy writing. I enjoy refining and expressing my thoughts. Yeah, I always thought Danielle lived inside a display cheese on the museum or something. I live in the library. I'm a living librarian. It's a rather contemporary setup. But yeah.
Ooh.
If you're so excited about book club and you couldn't stand to wait for our next meeting, which is a little bit over a month from now, then we have our other book club, which today we've talked about non-fiction, literary fiction. That book club is for science fiction and fantasy, and we are currently reading. I edited this badly, so it still says The Dispossessed. We are currently reading The Gilded Ones by Naina Fauna. Please do not mind me being really bad at copy editing. And we'll be meeting for that one on Saturday, the 18th of April. So if you're just too excited, or maybe due to the traffic, the whole of Britain arrived a little bit late, there's another book club coming up soon, which you'll be able to yap about and take part. I've only just started The Gilded One, so I can't comment much on it. But I mentioned to one of my friends that I was reading it, and they've really enjoyed the series, and so I'm even more excited now.
Oh, sick. Oh,
Yeah.
awesome. I haven't
Um,
started either.
yeah, I read too quickly. I'm trying to do a better job of timing when I finish books to book club. Um, because I know, for
Same.
example, in the previous book club, I'd finished Iron Widow like 3.5 weeks before book club. And so I did a little bit of a better job. I finished this one on Thursday, so that's like a better timing. Um, but yeah, I think um, I don't know. If people would be interested in the stream where I go through my TBR, we could do that. Or we could just do it as a Discord, as a community night. Everyone goes insane. I don't know how broadly spread the experience of having too many books on your TBR is. Kai's the worst one, but how bad it is for the rest of us, I don't know. I might be second on the list. But yeah.
I would say Kai is the worst one. That's mean. It
Would
might
you?
be true, but it's
I mean,
mean.
how many? 800?
Yeah, it crossed 800.
Yeah. Ba, 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 ba. Okay.
It's a problem. It's an issue. I shouldn't be having an 800 book TBR.
It's probably not the optimum length of a TBR.
The other issue about it is like it's an 800 book TBR, and I keep adding to it, and I don't read off of it, and I read a lot of books already. So
The thing which I have, which gets to me, is that I will only add the first book in a series to my TBR. I won't add the whole series until I've read it, because I don't know if I'm going to read the rest of the series. And then oftentimes I want to read the rest of the series. Um, a book which you might be excited about is I'm planning to finally read The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. That's on my shelf
ooh,
now.
yeah.
I've also got the second book on there. I'm borrowing them from a friend, so please do not mind me breaking my neck. My shelf is directly behind me, so I turn around to look at it. I should take a photo of my physical TBR because I've got it on neatly on the shelf now, and I have new bookends. Oh, new bookends! Everybody be excited about books. Okay. Ba, 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 ba. Let me go ready to rumble. So, I believe relatively prompt that is going to be the end of book club for today. So we are going to be getting ready to raid and rumble over to Lena, who I believe is doing a kind of Minecraft stream later, but has a new model update, which is always exciting.
Ooh.
Lena does so much work to prep and organize her streams. It's genuinely incredible. When I think about like VTubers who I want to be when I grow up. Lena. Um, uh, very cool. Um, no one's allowed to say I was being sappy because otherwise I'll get stick. But yes, let us get ready to raid and rumble. I hope everyone is excited
So
for book
noted.
club. I hope you enjoyed the books. I hope you feel energized. And even if you didn't want to, even if you won't be reading along with us next month, I hope you've left invigorated and excited about the books that you get to have as a part of your life. And I will see you next week. I am not 100% sure how much of a schedule there will be for next week. There'll be a rescheduling of Icebreaker Games. Apologies about the delay for that yesterday. Um, But yeah, I'll be posting. I think it will most likely be no schedule next week, but there'll be at least 2 streams, so I'll keep you updated, and I'll
Yeah.
see you sometimes then. I'll be bye bye
Bye
bye
bye.
bye bye bye. Rah.
Tell Lena Daniel said nice things. All
Tell
right. It
Lena
was just
Denya
after.
said I stink.
It was just after. It was just after. Damn.